Let's call this meeting to order. Today is January 19th, 2016, and we are officially opening our second meeting of the year. Let the record show that all three commissioners are present, and we are going to start with a public comment period. I have two people signed up right now. If you haven't signed up but want to say something at the end, just go ahead and get ready to walk up here to the podium on my right. Mr. Pemberton is our first speaker.
Can you hear me okay from there?
I don't know if the speakers we'll get you the portable there for the recording.
Thank you very much. I have a very short comment. I'm Brian Pemberton. I'm on Northwest Explorations, also serve on the Marine Advisory Committee. I believe the last item on the agenda to give me because I'm unable to stay here to be here when you address this issue, but it's for certain changes to the rules and regulations as it pertains to charging for mortgage rates, transient mortgage rates, and the rules affecting merchant leaseholders. The merchant leaseholders as a group met along with the Marine Advisory Board over 8 times last year discussing these various changes. A lot of give and take. At the end of the day, the Marine Advisory Committee voted unanimously to accept these changes. I'm here to indicate a support for these changes. We urge you to consider favorable consideration to this resolution 1226. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. And next on our list, Mike Patterson. Oh,
Good afternoon, ladies.
it's on.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And congratulations, Mr. Briscoe, with your latest election nomination. That's very good. My name is Mike Patterson. I own fishing vessel Ruby Lily and sailing vessel Pelagic. Pelagic's located in GE 17, and Ruby Lily is over in Gate 5 and 13 thereabouts. I'm here to talk about 3 things. First of all, I'd like to praise the management, Mr. Stoll, Mr. Fix, for bringing us this young, rapacious, intelligent young man. I forgot your name now. I went blank, but no, I'm grateful. No, and we're Mr. Randolph, and he's a bright star on the horizon, and we're appreciative, grateful. The other issue I'd like to approach is, or just comment along as well as the Randolph issue is our staff is awful quality. The members that we have that work the front desk at Squalicum are not substandard individuals. They have a difficult job, and the money that we gave them here recently in their contract negotiations was in a good approach to bringing them up to what they do on a day-to-day basis. My second issue today is the vandalism to my sailboat. 2 years in a row I've had vandalism on my sailboat. Winter before last, somebody kicked out the glass Dodger window while I was in Port Townsend hauled out. I go to Port Townsend haul out a fishing vessel because they allow me to work on my bottom. They allow me to work. Thank you, Mr. Briscoe. They allow me to work on the bottom of the vessel by myself, and consequently, some people aren't too happy about that. But the second issue was my sailboat was again last winter untied. The line now it doesn't work at all. The last
It's working.
the spring line was untied, slacked, and that mooring line is brand new, hadn't been adjusted or moved for 1 year. So it's not like I'm incompetent and feeble and got CRS and a bunch of other things. But all these incidents happen while I'm gone in the shipyard in Port Townsend, and that's what I'm here to bring you address. That's my main issue today. Mr. Tibby was well aware of this issue prior to it even happening, because he suggested that he offered that if I ever had any problems or difficulties in the harbor, to let him know, and he would evict any tenants or transients that were pestering or annoying and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that's what I'm mainly here for. My third issue, and I hope I keep it under 5 minutes, is my web locker, building number 1 in Blaine, Washington. And we've got a little bit of a receding break wall there that's eroded and pretty much rotted away. And I didn't see it on the wharf, Blaine Wharf Road improvement schedule, so I thought maybe I'd just bring it up. I didn't want to be too rude or pushy or whatever, but it's making my access to WebLocker G rather difficult. It's dangerous, in my opinion. It's been like this for years. I pretty much ignored it. It's an issue that's it's progressively deteriorating. There's a good grade there, and if I use the forklift with a crab pots on it, I'm afraid we might have a little bit of a problem. But I would be the operator, and I wouldn't allow one of my crew to use the forklift in that situation, because I do deem it an unsafe condition. But those are my issues. Thank you again. I all appreciate it, and thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, thanks, Mike. You did keep it under 5, but we have a 3-minute limit, so you're way over. It's,
I'm sorry, Robert's Rule of Order
It's-
says I get 5,
it's to-
so I thought that's what we did.
we're very generous around here, so,
Thank you.
yeah, I don't think we've,
I'll keep it under 3.
I think in my 6 years, I've heard one person ever attempted to be cut off, and that didn't even work, so. So that's all that's signed up. Did you have a comment? Oh, Mr. Briscoe has a comment.
Mr. Patterson, is that correct? Building 1 and the locker you're talking about, that's on the northeast end of the building? You're talking about the off the sawtooth?
Correct.
You're talking about where the sawtooth drops down?
Correct. Correct.
Are you in that corner, the big corner locker, or are you on one of the end lockers?
I'm on an end locker with no overhang, adjacent to Burrell's seafood facility.
Okay, very good.
All out.
I'm familiar with what you're speaking to, and it is an issue. It needs to be taken care of.
Cause a lot of problems.
No,
And I would also offer, here, I'm going into my 3 minutes, but I would also offer to purchase some D1 and half-inch minus to spread it out, and I'll take on all that responsibility. And that would bring it up to standard and allow it to slough some more for the next 2 or 3, 5 years, or until I die.
Very, very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. It looks like Charles Law, we have one more that has signed up. Did I read that correctly?
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Law, and from Bellingham, Washington. And I want to talk to you in regards to the possible shipping of wood pellets. I'd like to know just what type of finished product that would you be shipping, and where precisely would this product be coming from? And finally, how are we planning to harvest this product sustainably? If the term torrefaction should come up, I see no reason justified that we can't use bamboo for the same purpose. A company called Green Coal is working on this process of torrefaction in Mozambique. And until there's an adequate torrefaction process in Bellingham, this product is unsustainable and robs the climate of organic matter needed to maintain our watershed as well as our environment. Now, if you want to know what torrefaction is, I have a brief description. It's a thermal process to convert biomass into coal-like material, which has a better fuel characteristics than the original biomass. Torrefied biomass is more brittle, making it grinding easier and less energy intense. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. All right, that is all that's signed up. Any comment?
Maybe I could get a copy of your information there very good. If you would, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything further in public comment period? Nobody? All right, we will close that. Pass that to Diane, thank you. And we are going to move into our consent agenda. Diane?
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through L.
All right, any discussion, gentlemen?
A through
L?
L?
Quick questions, anything?
I have a couple of questions
Yeah.
On J, one of my questions is, I'm not sure we know exactly what we're doing with the North Pier yet. And if I'm reading this correctly, we're looking at design and costs and so on and so forth for the dock.
Norman Gilbert, project engineer, Port of Bellingham. So the scope of the work for item J is to take our condition assessment that was just completed last year and develop those repairs. So we've identified, piling, pile caps, decking, to essentially put the facility back to its original condition. So it's almost independent of use at that point.
Mr. President.
Oh, yeah, please.
So what this is we're just putting both the north and the south pier dock back to their original condition? Not any physical size changes or,
Strictly a repair.
okay,
It won't change lengths, widths, heights, anything else. It's
okay,
putting it back to how it was.
okay, very good. Thank you. I have one on item H, the authorization to sell the vessel pursuant to Resolution 947. And this, I'm assuming this vessel is in Squalicum Harbor, Kyle, is that where it's at? My question is, that have we had contact with the owner? Has he responded in any manner, and we have spoken with him?
I haven't reached out to the customer recently. I did talk to, I think this is Mrs. Mullins. I spoke to her several months ago. I know Michelle has had repeated letters sent to her regarding this matter. It's kind of a standard situation. To get to this point, to be ready to go for auction, we haven't received payment in about 6 months.
Okay, but they haven't expressed any concern about the vessel to keep it, or?
No, they have not. I spoke with them about 3 months ago because this person is also not in compliance with insurance, as well as has not provided us a new mortgage agreement. So I spoke to them at that time. We had a lengthy conversation, but they didn't discuss with me at the time what their intentions were.
And could you tell me, is this vessel kind of a derelict vessel? Is it a pretty nice vessel, or?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Anything quick, Dan?
I didn't have anything.
All right, I have one shorty. It's item E, Resolution 1349. At the beginning, in Section 2A, there's a statement that says when staff is anybody looking at this? Might be a Dan Stahl question. Staff makes a determination. I'm looking at Google Earth at Blaine right now. Thank you, Mr. Patterson, for bringing that to our attention. Appreciate it. Let me see if I can find the right page here. Not that one. Not that one. Oh, here. This is a little faster than the web. Yes. What did I say? Section 2A. Here we go. First sentence. It's Section 2, non-paying of mortgage charges. At the beginning, it says the port shall, when staff determines that collection efforts, et cetera. When do you get to the state that you're determining that collection efforts are needed?
90 days without payment, it would be deemed
Okay. Do we need to say that in this particular section, or is it stated elsewhere that satisfies?
Says it on C2, I
Right.
think.
Yeah, on C.
C2 refers.
Page 204,
refers to 90
C2.
days.
Good enough. All right. Anything further?
Nothing.
Okay. Hearing nothing further, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And let's move on to a presentation. Mr. Snodgrass, there you go.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dodd Snodgrass, Economic Development Specialist. We're here today to give you an update on the Port's Technology Development Center. We're going to cover the history and overview, goals of the TDC, the current status, leadership, projects, programs, company partnerships, improvements, faculty's program, and facility program and policy, and activities to increase the use of the TDC. That's the Technology Development Center. It's in the corner of 1000 F Street, which is the Storecraft Warehouse Building, which was previously the GP Warehouse. Back in 2008, Governor Gregoire created the Innovation Partnership Zone program. The intent of that was to create geographic areas in the state that would be a nexus of R&D, workforce training, and world-class companies. We designated the Waterfront District, at the time I don't think we had branded the Waterfront District, the Waterfront area, as an IPZ. And we were able to secure a capital grant as well as some federal funding. So the vision was to work with Western and Bellingham Technical College to create this nexus of technology and R&D in a physical facility and create a first step project in the waterfront. We were able to construct a facility with primarily with grant funding from the state and the feds. And it basically has two areas. One was designated to Western, one designated to the technical college. So they're sort of separate activities. And over the past few years, there have been a variety of different activities that have occurred in there. We had the hybrid composite bus program that was built out over a year. We housed the fisheries and aquaculture program for BTC while the Perry Center was getting built. Industrial design startup company was in there. TAG had their offices, Technology Alliance Group, and we had some training programs and some industry partnerships. But we really didn't have the focus or the collaboration with the schools that we really needed to move things forward. So about 2 years ago, we had some renewed leadership and some opportunities with funding and new programs. And so with me today in the presentation, I've got Nicole Hoekstra. She's our TDC director from Western Washington University, and she's a professor of plastics and composites engineering. And then I've got Peter Morgan, and Peter's an instructor of Bellingham Technical College's new composites and engineering technology program. And so we've been working this out over the last couple of years to create this partnership that's pretty exciting and pretty forward-thinking. And so we've crafted this mission statement to be really focused in composites and advanced materials and looking at areas and sectors we can excel in, including aerospace research, marine, and outdoor equipment, outdoor recreation equipment. So that's the focus and direction. And I'd like to turn it over to Nicole, and she's going to move to the next portion of the program.
Thanks, Dodd. So as Dodd said, I'm Nicole Hoekstra. I've been at Western since 1998. And we've seen a lot of changes at Western in our engineering programs, but one of the things that's always been really important to us is a very hands-on program with lots of industry collaborations. And one of the things that this space has allowed us to do is really to expand that into an area that gives companies room to expand their production, have some security if they have intellectual property issues that they want to secure, entrepreneurs who need a space to be able to work. And so, as Dodd mentioned, we've had a fresh group of people that have come in the last year, and we're really excited about the things that are going to be happening down there in the next few years because of that fresh new group, and those are the things I want to go over. So our goals for this space is that any project that we do down there would have all three of these, that this space would be a place for collaboration between industry, Western faculty, and students. And if the space is significantly underutilized, we would consider projects that maybe only had one or two of those. But we're really looking for projects that have an opportunity for all three. And it's exciting for us to be able to have collaboration between BTC and Western as often as possible. The other thing is we're wanting to talk about long-term goals for Western and BTC at the waterfront with industry collaborations. And that's really a place where we're looking for input from the community, input from the port, input from industry. So these are our target areas because we want to focus on specific industries that we think here in the Northwest make the most sense, but also fit with the expertise and capabilities of our programs. And so you'll see a theme in recreation, aerospace, marine, the energy industry, And then also educational programs throughout the state. So those are the places where we're targeting our efforts in trying to increase activities at the TDC. So as Dodd mentioned, we've had some new leadership. So what you see up in the upper left is Walter. He is a brand new dean. You see he just showed up at the beginning of this academic year. And Peter Morgan, who's going to be the next presenter, just started in September. And so we've seen a huge influx of new ideas and new activity with these new people. On the right-hand side, Catherine Clark is a brand new dean at Western. And as soon as she came in, she recognized that the TDC was really, really underutilized as a space and assigned me to be the director or the point person for the entire university for those activities. And just having her leadership and assigning that role to me has allowed us to really streamline some of the things that we're doing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things we're doing right now, and then the next thing is going to be some things that we have planned in the future that we'd like to get some input on. So I'd like to talk about projects, companies, and programs. The first one is a project that's down there right now. We've had a long-term relationship with Zodiac Aerospace. They have a facility in Marysville, but other ones all along the West Coast. And what you see on the left is a manufacturing process that's used to create composite materials. And that entire process was designed and created by Western students and faculty along with engineers at Zodiac. And the 3 images you see on the right are actually screenshots from a video that was produced by the state of Washington. I don't want to say it was a marketing tool, but it's a way for the funding organization that we got the money from to convince Washington legislators that the money was well spent and that the state should continue to support these things. So those are screenshots of this research along with a visit by Governor Inslee, who came to our program to learn more about how we're having industry collaborations here at Western. We've gotten $400,000 from the state and $750,000 from Zodiac to support this research over the last 4 years. A company that's actually a tenant in the space right now is called Atlas. They make software for 3D glasses. And that software enables a company to be able to take information. Think like you got a 2D drawing, and you have to look at that 2D drawing and think about how does this assemble, or how do I repair this? And nowadays, engineers and production people really want to think in 3D. So they're really working with a lot of Northwest companies to say, how can we take our technology and integrate it with either your production floor, your maintenance, your design engineers. So what you're seeing on the right is an example of that, where there's a soldier who's working on an aircraft, and what he's seeing is actually the instructions for how to do some maintenance work as he's interacting with the equipment. So why would we house a company like that at the TDC if we're focusing on marine and recreation and aerospace? And it's because they started their company on Lopez. They wanted to come to Bellingham because of the technology community here, the Technology Alliance Group specifically, and access to Western. And so they're in that space as an entrepreneur, and they've hired lots and lots of Western grads and interns, and they're interacting a lot with our computer science program. We're hoping that they're going to get some contracts with local aerospace companies to really start to apply their technology, and then we'll be able to work with them more in the engineering department. Now I'm going to turn it over to Peter Morgan. He's going to talk about their new composites program.
How's it going? So the Composites Engineering Technology Program is new to BTC, and it was created for the growing need in aerospace manufacturing workers. And that's where I came from. I've been working for Boeing for the last 5 years, and previously locally for Janicki Industries and Pro CNC, which is a small machinist shop, now True Life. So the program sets students up to go directly into industry as either a technician or to go on to a 4-year like Western, and we're articulating our program with other 4-year engineering programs as well. Currently, the first year enrollment, we have 23 students, but that's not actually a great number representation. We have over 100 actually declared as engineering, undecided in which specific engineering program they're going to go into. So there's a lot of buzz on BTC's campus, and in the first year launching, it's looking really good right now. So we share the facility at TDC with Western, as you guys know now, and it is a pretty state-of-the-art facility. Our ventilation system is as good as you can get on composites, which is great because we're keeping our students and everyone else healthy and safe there. We have a CNC router, and the program, the composites program, is going to be centered around CAD/CAM, CNC programming and machining, as well as other fabrication, 3D printing, basic other fabrication, trim tools and that kind of thing. We have a $50,000 oven, which is used for curing pre-impregnated carbon fiber, which to aerospace grades. So one of the big things is having the first year students build recreational equipment to like skis and snowboards and surfboards and kayaks to learn the different tools in the lab. And then the second year students work with industry and collaborate with projects and research projects and that kind of thing. We're building our advisory committee right now, and we have a couple different companies who are involved. Boeing sent up 3 different people that work in workforce recruiting, as well as professional training, and they're interested in the TDC as a possible location for professional training. Other people that were on that advisory committee were Hexcel down in Burlington. Janicki is going to possibly participate. Zodiac, here we had a couple people there, previously Heath Techna. So yeah, the program's it's off to a good start. It was funded by 3 different Washington State grants. One was an aerospace grant, and we're getting into the clean energy grant that Nicole's going to talk more about.
So as an example of one of the collaborations that we've been able to do with BTC is this push towards a better understanding of energy. And so BTC has had a kind of an HVAC program. And so what they want to be able to do is elevate that into really understanding all of the ways that you're using and supplying energy throughout a system. And at the same time, Western wanted to launch an energy studies program. It's a good fit for Western with our environmental college. So the two got together and wrote an NSF grant recently. And so funds from that NSF grant is really building curriculum to create a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree and a Bachelor of Arts degree in energy policy and energy sciences at Western, and then collaborating with BTC to help them build their 2-year program so that students can either go on into industry at the end of the 2 years or matriculate to a program like Western to get a 4-year degree. Another program improvement that we've had recently is Western traditionally had engineering technology programs, and we've transitioned those to engineering programs. And I didn't anticipate that this would happen, but it has significantly improved our ability to get external funding, and we have doubled the number of externally funded projects every year since 2011. So those are projects that either companies are funding directly or that we have funding from the state or federal areas to help with the expenses. The other thing with the new deans at our schools and having my dean assign me to be the director is half of my teaching load was given to somebody else. So that gave me some time to work on things. And one of the things is policy. And I didn't anticipate how much benefit that would give, but the amount of time spent on a memorandum of understanding so that we could have the entire TDC shared by all of the users. So we used to be squirreled away in our separate spaces, which means a lot of duplicate efforts. And we have a memorandum of understanding now so that all of the users get to share all the spaces, which means all of us get to use that $500,000 worth of equipment that Peter just showed. So getting that through all the lawyers at all the various users was a lot of work. The other thing is we've created tenant agreements, so companies like Atlas or any future potential tenant could come in. So to do that the very first time took a lot of work, but now that it's in place, our lead time and our ability to turn around and have a new tenant actually do business out of the TDC is going to be really quick. The other thing is research agreements. Those also took a lot of time, dealing with confidentiality, intellectual property, how to budget and invoice and track expenses associated with research. So we feel really good that we'll be able to not be the slow university that industry complains about whenever they want to work with us, that it just takes too long. So we want to reduce that lead time, be more responsive. So the next section of our presentation is, those are all the things we've gotten done up till now. These are the things that we want to do in the future. And when I go to events and I talk to companies, the things that I talk to them about is existing companies that could use our space to expand because they're overfilling their current space and just need more room. The other thing is a research company who wants to do R&D, but they need a private space. And then the third group is entrepreneurs. Companies who maybe are in their garage or in a small space and really need to expand, they could utilize a lot of that equipment. The other activity is state and federal funding. So we're continuing to collaborate with BTC, but also work independently to go after state and federal funding that can help to add more resources or add more projects that we could work on with companies. The other thing is there's a pretty strong organization in the state of Washington within the community colleges and the universities. And one of them is the Center of Excellence for Marine Manufacturing that's located in Anacortes. So we're working with them to find opportunities to do recruitment and education and make connections. The other thing is there's organizations that are interested in using the TDC to host events that may not necessarily fall under one of those target areas. So when someone comes to us and says, hey, could we use the TDC for this event, we really have to think about what are the benefits of that. And hopefully someday we'll be so busy that we won't have to worry about events that don't hit all three of those target goals. But at this point, we are still considering small events, even a company wanting to be able to do training out of that facility. So they're not really getting involved with Western or BTC, they're just using the space. So here's some examples of, I guess I'd call them leads. They're things that we're working on right now. We've had contact with companies like Nike. Transition Composites is both in recreation and in aerospace. They're located here in Bellingham. Vartega Carbon Fiber Recycling is currently in Colorado, but may be interested in moving to the Northwest so they can be closer to all of the composites companies in the region. So these are things that we're talking with companies, bringing them up, showing them the facility, talking about potential. So those are all leads we're very excited about. iTech Energy is a Bellingham company that does manufacturing, but it's a great opportunity for us to collaborate with because of the energy studies programs at our schools. Dodd and I both attended a Composites and Advanced Materials Expo and talked to a lot of companies about some benefits of being located in the Northwest. There's an engineering and design open house coming up in June, so we're going to be having tours of the TDC associated with that. We typically have 40 to 60 people from the Northwest that come. In terms of entrepreneurs, getting connected with the local Bellingham Foundry, they find that they have a lot of people come in where their scope of work is just too big for the Foundry to host. So they're going to be sending them over to us to be able to talk about if we could host those activities. And here in Bellingham, there's the second annual Recreation Northwest Expo, and there's a summit discussion to talk about how do we expand the recreation economy here in the Northwest. So we're going to be attending that and talking to people about what Western and BTC and the TDC can do to help those activities. Some other organizations are Western's Extended Ed. They offer classes to elementary schools during spring break, and could we host those at the TDC and use the facility? There's also a Composites Washington Symposium coming up, which is all the trade schools, technical colleges, community colleges that are all doing work in composites. So as often as we can, we try to get together and share secrets and talk about opportunities for the future. That's coming up next month. We also coordinate grant activities. Let me skip that because I'm going to come back. Here's some examples of things that we have going on this year. So we have NSF, Air Force, Washington State funding, and direct funding from companies like Zodiac Aerospace. We also have a grant to Western to have Western spend some of their capital investment money to improve the ventilation at the TDC. So these are all things that we have either already submitted or will be submitting this year.
NSF is National Science Foundation?
Yes, National Science Foundation.
JCATI, what's that?
JCATI is state funding that was, that's a line item specifically for industry university partnerships to reduce hurdles in the aerospace industry. So the A is aerospace, so it's Joint Commission for Aerospace Technology Innovation.
Thank you.
And they give $1 million a year, 10 grants of $100,000 each.
That's the biggest taxpayer.
And 9 of the 10 went to UW and Wazoo, and 1 came to us. So we're very proud about that to compete with those big dogs. So all of these things affect both building relationships, but also increasing the activities that are down there. We want to get the TDC to the point where we don't know how we'd function without it, because we'd have to say no to a lot of these things without that space. BTC is continuing to pursue state funding. The U.S. government, along with the state, has significantly increased funding towards community colleges and technical colleges. So BTC is doing a really good job of getting involved in that. An example that I wanted to give of some leads, some things that we're chasing because we feel it's a really good fit, is iTech Energy, which is right here in Bellingham. I wanted to point this out because it has the TDC right, the TDC's right in this corner. So this is the Storecraft warehouse, and our facility is 10,000 square feet in the corner of a 250,000 square foot building. And this solar panel installation was just completed, and the ribbon cutting happened about 2 months ago. And so we're hoping to really continue to work with them. Ready for questions?
Nothing?
Very.
Yeah, Dan?
How many full-time equivalent employees are there now?
Like within our academic programs, or actually working at?
Actually working there at the TDC?
Oh, that's a good question. So the Zodiac Aerospace project that I was telling you about, where we actually have the manufacturing equipment down there, we have 3 students and a faculty member that are working on that, probably about half-time right now. But that faculty member is going on research sabbatical in the spring, so they're going to be down there 40 hours a week in the spring. So we don't really have a full-time equivalent that are dedicated to the facility. They're employees of the university that are assigned to activities that are down there. That's a portion of their assignment.
Thank you.
So Nicole, I've got a couple of questions for you, and maybe a couple for Dodd. First is, one of your slides, the quote was manufacturing, or working with manufacturing companies who need production space. And this has come up many times. I've brought it up myself. That used to be the largest building in Whatcom County. It's been superseded by something in Linden now. The port receives about $800,000 in revenue from that, the other 4 acres that the TDC is not using. And to do that expansion where you're working with manufacturing companies, you clearly need more space than the 20,000 square feet that's currently shared between Western and BTC. So something to think about in the future would be backfilling that. First, we'd have to find an appropriate building. I personally would like to see them move out into a privately owned structure, and we can use this for what you're talking about. But there are some hurdles there that we definitely have to discuss and figure out. Because we certainly couldn't leave 3 acres empty without somehow finding the funds to backfill that loss in income. So that's something to think about, but certainly I'm excited about it, so that's great. The other question I've got is for you specifically in your research, something that came up at a conference about a year ago. There was a fellow that was talking about creating a living building challenge, but for the marine world. And one of the things in living buildings is there's a red list. There are certain materials you cannot use in the buildings, and that red list is really severe. And there's only one building, I think, in the U.S. that meets every standard for every red list product. Doesn't have any red list products in it. But creating similar for the marine industry could have some significant impact because nobody's done it. And for example, the sheathing on wiring, which is a kind of plastic, right? So finding those plasticizers and replacements that could be used in the marine world, but also would meet sort of that living building challenge for the red list there. That would be something that nobody's done. And I think that might be it's my opinion, but there are people out there that are paying attention to it, and it could be something that can be done here locally, or things along those lines, because people are paying attention to it now. But just something that might be worth thinking about. I guess that was more of a statement than a question for you. My apologies. Yes, I got you captive. That's great.
No, that's great. Thank you. We're always looking for opportunities to develop new materials for very specific applications. We really like that extremely applied type of research.
Yeah.
Me personally and most of my colleagues were not interested in the fundamental research where we don't really know where it's going, but we're going to work on it anyway. We like the stuff that has a very specific application. One of the projects we're doing with Zodiac right now is dealing with flammability, and that's why that plastic coating is on the wire, is because if the wire ever gets broke and you have an arc, it puts out its own fire. But there aren't great replacements that don't have similar health or environmental issues. So the materials we're working on for Zodiac, if you have a fire inside the airplane, that's bad. But there aren't great replacements for what's currently inside the airplane. So
Yeah.
there could be a dovetail with the work we're already doing for the aerospace industry.
Plus, it's a big challenge. Why wouldn't a university professor like a challenge like that?
Oh, yeah, we love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further for Nicole? No?
I have nothing further.
If I may, Dodd, I've got a couple of questions for you. These are more TDC related and IPZ. So Western and BTC, they've kind of had a long history working together here. But why only Western and BTC? Why not bring in Wacom or even other regional schools that might have a way to work with what's already set up?
Oh, there's plenty of room for additional collaborations.
Okay.
And the initial relationships with those two schools to meet the requirements. But certainly, the Marine Center of Excellence, for example, is out of Skagit Valley College. And, I want to point out a lot of these collaborations we're talking about, aerospace, things that aren't naturally located here, but we have the signature activity here. We're going to see more of these kinds of companies be attracted to Whatcom County because of availability, costs of being down in Puget Sound. So we see that huge opportunity. So
Super.
other schools, other partnerships, absolutely, we can bring them on board.
Awesome. And then IPZs have essentially been ignored since, and this is not a criticism, it's just a fact of funding realities out of Olympia, but they've essentially been ignored since they were created. And is there any new sort of ideas about what to do with them or how to leverage them, or is it just a label that we're still using, but it's not really, there's no really advantage to speaking about it or using it when we talk to people in Olympia?
Well, as you know, we elected not to redesignate our IPZ because the advantages in terms of programs and funding, we already have access to that. We have the industry, we have the collaboration in place, so we didn't see the ongoing value. I can't speak for the other IPZs. A number of them didn't re-up, and there isn't a financial resource the legislature has provided in terms of planning or capital projects. There have been some one-shot opportunities. With it. So I can't really predict the future of the program.
Okay, yeah, I haven't heard anything at all, and all the information online is old,
Yeah.
so it may be just a dead.
We feel we can meet the goals of that with our relationships without having to be under that.
Sure. All right, that's it for me. Dan, anything for Don?
Nothing.
Thank you.
Anything over there, Mr. Briscoe? No? All right. Is that the whole presentation then?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you to Nicole and Peter for sure, and good luck on this new program. I hope it's super successful, like wildly successful, so we can find a new home for Stortcraft, whom I love as a tenant, by the way. Where's Shirley? Yes, Shirley. You know. Okay. I should say that to Dan. All right, so that's it. We're going to move on to our action items, if we can, and our first one is regarding our director's base salary. Diane?
A motion to approve an increase in the base salary of the executive director by 3% over the 2015 annual salary, effective immediately.
So here's where we embarrass, no, I'm kidding. Well, we're not embarrassing anybody. The proposal is a 3% increase, which is pretty much in line with the rest of the crew around here. And is Elizabeth here? There's Elizabeth. Can I ask you a quick question, Elizabeth?
Yes, sir.
So in the excuse me, in the background here, it says that it's same percentages given to the majority of non-represented port employees. Would this be higher or lower, higher than some and lower than others, or is it what is it? What do you mean by the majority?
It would not be lower than anyone.
Okay.
Or no one else, excuse me, no one would be lower in the non-rep. So when you approved the budget last November, you approved an across-the-board salary increase for non-represented at 3%.
Okay.
In addition to our across-the-board, we do have a performance-based merit system wherein non-represented employees have an opportunity to earn slightly more than that. But
Okay.
not less.
Okay. Would Rob fit into that? By the way, I've never asked that question. I don't know. I don't know that you would.
Three of you.
That's funny. I know we've talked about it in the past. I've never thought about that one. I don't know. If you do really great job, maybe. Well, that's a serious conversation about
I
it.
think his ribs are getting sore.
I don't know. Mr. Briscoe, any comment on this?
No comment.
No. Dan?
Yes, I just had a couple of questions. A year ago, we gave Rob a bigger increase because he was down around number 17 compared to other ports in the state. With that increase we gave him, I think it took him, and don't quote me on this, but I think around number 7 or 8 in the ports, and we're the 4th biggest port. So he's still below what the 4th biggest port would be. Does this bring him any closer, or is it still about the same?
You know, Commissioner Robbins, I've not looked at that study recently, since about last time you looked at that, so I don't know where he is as far as ranking. I can get that information for you.
So this isn't based on that at all, it's just based on a 3% across the board?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, anything further? No? Anything further? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you, Elizabeth. And moving on, item 2, meetings and events. Diane?
Authorize the meetings and events supervisor to approve refunds up to 25% of the room rental fee according to the approved rate schedule, but not to exceed $750 for dissatisfied customers.
Afternoon, I'm Tiffany DeSimone, Meetings and Events Supervisor. And you have in front of you an action memo requesting that I be able to approve up to 25% of the room rental fee for dissatisfied customers. And it's in front of you for a couple of reasons. One, to answer an audit suggestion from the 2015 audit, in that we have this in our standard operating policy so that it's clear and concise, and also in the interest of continued customer service.
Super.
Any questions?
Dan?
What would some dissatisfactions be? I'm just kind of curious.
I knew that was going to come up. Well, of course, we hope that we have very few, but occasionally over the past year, there have been some issues. Perhaps if the air conditioning goes out on the hottest day of the year on your wedding day, or, you know, the bathrooms overflow when you're having a giant family reunion, or really we have very few.
How many in a year about?
Less than a handful, less than 5, probably.
We got some big hands up here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bobby?
Anything else?
Dan asked the questions, or Commissioner Robbins asked the questions I was going to ask.
So Tiffany, why 25%? How do you settle on a 25% number?
Well, if you're thinking about dealing with the community and the public, and you get this call, or you show up at the boathouse and they're really upset and it's an emotional day, I think that's a reasonable amount. And the 25% number rather than a dollar number comes because all our facilities are different rates, different times of the year. So.
Okay.
Now, the 25% though is a maximum.
Yes.
Yeah, it's up to 25%.
Is it
Not more than.
up to but not exceeding 750?
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
So anything over that amount would have to come to you for approval. So we're not precluding that. We're just saying that if it's over $750 or 25%, we have to come to you for approval.
So I had someone who did not know I was a port commissioner complaining about the port, and I love those actually because they're the best ones. And it was about rental reimbursement for the Squalican Boathouse. And wedding didn't happen, wanted 100% reimbursement, got 0, because that's the policy. And how do you satisfy even with 25%? Is that person just never going to get satisfied?
Perhaps.
Okay. Okay. All right. This is certainly more than 0, which has been the past policy. So you would tell folks that rented facilities that had an issue, sorry, the commission hasn't given me any authorization, and they just have to go away unhappy.
In some cases in the past, we would actually just write off an amount, and then we'd be in violation of our policy, which is why the auditors brought this up.
Right. All right. Well, would you still be willing to do that though? writing off even more and just getting it on
I
money later?
I think if we have a concrete policy like this that limits us to 25% or $750, we would stick to it.
Okay, all right. I don't have anything further, Dan.
I guess because the wedding's called off, I'm not sure the port's responsible for that if it's a last-minute deal and we couldn't book it. But I think it's a good policy as long as it's up to the 25%. I have no problem with that. And it is difficult. There are things that do come up, as you mentioned, and it's nice to have a policy.
All right, Dan. Bobby? Nothing? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Tiffany. Item number 3.
A motion to approve a termination of lease with Superior Energy Services LLC, or SES, and the Port of Bellingham for property located at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, and a motion to approve a termination of berthing agreement between SES and the Port for property located at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dave Warder, Marine Terminals Manager for the Port. Today for your consideration are 2 early termination agreements for Superior Energy Services for their lease and their berthing agreement at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal. Superior has been leasing from the Port since 2012 when they were contracted to build the oil containment barge, the Arctic Challenger. With the recent announcement by Shell to cease further explorations in Alaska, Superior has been tasked with closing the operations here in Bellingham prior to the expiration of their lease obligations. These early termination agreements accomplish 2 things. One, it allows Superior to have a clean exit from their lease and berth agreements that they are no longer utilizing, and it will allow the Port to begin marketing the warehouse space that will be vacated by the end of this month. In consideration of these termination agreements, Superior has agreed to pay a lump sum payment of 80% of the projected revenues that would have been collected from the lease and the berth agreements, equaling $301,872 plus leasehold tax. Today, I'd also like to introduce Eric Namvet from Superior Energy. He has come up from Houston. He is the Vice President of the Marine Technical Division and would like to address the Commission at this time.
Thank you, Dave. Commission, Board of Commissioners, my name is Eric Namtved. I'm the Vice President of Superior Energy Services, the Marine Technical Division. As you may know, we've been a tenant of this excellent port for 4 years now, since we started our project. We've generated a lot of activity, and this was an excellent place for us to basically build a vessel, as you know, and support it from a warehouse, and including also employing a number of people from the Bellingham community. You may be aware that there was an economic impact assessment study done not very long ago about our involvement in the Puget Sound, and I think Superior in total have spent close to $150 million in this area, which has kind of shows the kind of involvement we've had. Unfortunately, we are subjected to our clients, and in this case, the termination of our relationship to support Shell in the Arctic is a fact, and unfortunately, we are no longer in need of the facilities here, and then we are now progressing not only here, but in other parts of the country, including in Alaska, to close down our operations. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank not only the port and the Board of Commissioners, but also all the employees, Dave Warder especially, for the very, very good service and support and excellent cooperation that we've had with the port through these 4 years. And it's a sad day for us to pack up and leave, but it comes with a strong and good feeling that Bellingham and the Port of Bellingham has been an excellent partner with us in achieving our goals. And I'd like to say that we did deliver to Shell what we were supposed to deliver very successfully, but it's not always exploration drilling shows the results that the oil companies are looking for. So with that, thank you so much for your time. And thanks again for cooperation and support.
Thank you.
Eric, go ahead.
Thank you for your business and coming to our city and helping our economy.
Well, I wanted to thank you as well. You were just a real boom to our whole economy, our hotels. Gosh, that Best Western up on Lakeway, I think they built a whole outdoor area there with the revenue they got from your folks staying there. It was just really good for our community. And if you ever decide to build something here again like that, this commissioner would welcome you with open arms.
Really appreciate that. I'll bring that back to our management. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm the only sitting commissioner up here right now that got to say yes to that lease. And while I personally, and I think some folks in our community often have time, or at times, look at our carbon economy and kind of question about the future. But I thought this particular project was a fantastic fit for Bellingham. A few of my friends disagree with me on that one, but I personally think that you folks, what you were doing there and what Shell asked you to do and what you delivered to Shell was a good thing. And we certainly do appreciate that you folks chose Bellingham, and in the future this kind of work would be welcome with open arms. So thanks again and good luck.
Really appreciate it. And good luck to you. I see the TDC and other activities, so you're on for the future.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dave.
Anything further, Dave?
Anything else? Any other questions?
Any comments, Mr. Briscoe? Mr. Robbins? All right. I will say that the lease and the law does authorize us to take a full accounting for this payment, and what I do appreciate is that Superior has stepped up and offered this particular buyout, which does allow us to get the facility out to lease a little bit sooner. So I appreciate Superior Energy for doing that part of this work. No further comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thanks, Dave. All right, next item, Diane.
A motion authorizing the executive director to enter into, 1, a contract with ABM Janitorial for Schedule A Aviation in the amount of $396,501.32, plus a $20,000 contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $416,501.32, and 2, a contract with 5 Star Services Incorporated for Schedule F facilities, including Alternate 1, Schedule MT Marine Terminals, Schedule MTV Blaine Marina, and Schedule P Properties in the amount of $289,750, plus a $10,000 contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $299,750.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Carol Williams, the Maintenance Manager, report. We're asking that you approve the motion to award these 5 separate contracts to the 2 individual contractors. Once again, this year, we solicited 5 separate individual bids for the janitorial services port-wide, trying to attract a smaller caliber company, janitorial company, perhaps a local company, to be successful at receiving some of our work. And we were successful in doing so in that we attracted 5 Star Janitorial Services, which is out of Skagit County. And it's a very young, new startup kind of company. So we're anxious to start working with them. One of the things I do want to bring to your attention is that although this is for a 1-year period, we're asking for the length of this contract. It is on a month-to-month basis. The bids came in such that currently the amounts that we solicited exceed our current operating budgets in many of the divisions. So we anticipate, after approval of this contract, going back in and doing some scope revisions to the contract to try to bring those services into scale with what is in the current operating budgets. If we're unable to do that, we may be looking for some type of budget amendment to cover these services if we get into that situation. Another thing I would like to bring up is knowing that this contract, and I believe it equals 800 and some odd thousand in total, is approaching a place in time where we are going to start looking at this seriously about potentially doing some of this work in-house with staff, because their labor rates are starting to be equitable to what we're paying for outside services. So we will be looking at that. As they say, we will also be looking at scope reductions to try to meet the budget. And we potentially may look at some kind of community partnership with an agency like Chinook Enterprises to do this service for us. So we're going to be looking at those the next first quarters of this year and try to make a recommendation by the time we get into the 2017 budget process so that we have the right numbers budgeted for next year. However, we're going to end up managing this going forward. In the meantime, I'm looking for a approval of the contracts. So, questions?
Thank you. Carol, Mr. Briscoe?
Yes, could we back up to the Chinook services part? Could you re-explain that a little bit? I think I missed that.
Yeah, as one of the alternatives of potentially trying to figure out what's the best way to execute these services that are needed, Chinook Enterprises, I'm not overly familiar. I believe they used to be Current Industries. Is that correct, Rob? So they hire disabled citizens to do work, and oftentimes we can make an agreement with them individually. These are at, a lower cost to an agency because of the workers. They're supervised by Chinook Enterprises supervisors, so it's not the day-to-day management that we'll have to do of these individuals, but it is a way to reduce our overall costs of the service required.
Thank you.
So if we approve this today, you can go back and rescope it, and, this looks like a contract that we're going to sign. You can rescope it later and
Yeah.
reduce the cost from there to meet the budget?
Yes, sir. We're hoping to have you approve the contracts so we can have them in place, and then we will execute change orders with a scope reduction to try to meet the current operating budgets.
So change orders on our part, not the,
Change orders on our part.
not their
We're
part like it
instigating-
usually is.
We're saying reduction in services at these facilities and trying to kind of pare it back to bare bones, if you will, to meet the budget, capacity that we
And-
currently have.
Two, you said that Five Star was a local company from Skagit County. I think a local is Whatcom County. And I see one of them here, Management Services Northwest, is left blank, and they were here, I think, last year, were they not?
They were here, they neglected to sign their bid, so it was non-responsive, so we weren't able to consider their numbers. So as we move through this process with a scope reduction on the current contract amounts, and then we figure out how best to execute this, if we go out to bid again, we're hopeful that Northwest Management Services will, submit a bid.
So we signed this contract with Five Star, and then you can go out and put it out for bid, and other bidders can come in as you rescope it, even though they have a contract?
No, what we'll do is reduce the services with Five Star and ABM, the two current or potential current providers. And then through the course of from now till May, we will figure out in-house, are we going to do it in-house with in-house labor? Are we going to use this modified scope that we've scaled back and then put it out to bid again at a later date to meet the budget? Or are we going to engage a company like Chinook Enterprises to do the services for us? Once again, that would have to meet our budget constraints as well.
And you can do that even though it's a one-year contract?
We can, because it's a month-to-month service contract. We're asking that you approve the month-to-month for a one-year period.
This contract approval is for 1 year, February 1st, 2016 to January 31st, 2017.
That's right, but it is a month-to-month contractual agreement because it's a service contract.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Frank, question to you, if I may. Northwest Management Services did not sign their bid.
Correct.
Seems to the average person, so they go sign their bid. Can you explain what happens and why? Because it seems like a small thing, but it actually isn't.
It actually isn't, and I am probably not the best person to answer that.
I'm
I know
gonna
there is
have
very-
Frank answer that one.
Pardon?
I'm gonna have Frank answer that one.
Okay.
There you go.
The bidding laws in Washington contemplate that there be a level playing field. So when there is a mistake in the bid, that's called an informality in the law. And typically, the owner can waive an informality so long as it doesn't create an unlevel playing field. So, for example, a bidder makes a mathematical error in adding up its columns. The owner can add up the columns and say, the government can say, well, this is the real number. The problem with not signing your bid is that you're not bound by your offer. So if you're the low bidder and you come in and we say, you're the low bidder, and the low bidder looks at all the other bids and says, gosh, I'm really low. I mean, the next low bidder is quite a bit higher. I'm going to withdraw my bid because something happened here. My bid is too low. Since they haven't signed their bid, there's technically no bid. There's no legally binding offer. So the courts have said where the bidder fails to sign its bid, then that's that defect confers a material advantage to the person who did sign their bid for that reason I've explained. And so you can't waive that informality.
Okay. Thank you for that, because the first time I heard about it, I thought it seemed rather insignificant and adjustable, but the courts have already, in the past, have taken a look at that and said, no, this is not something that we're going to let the owner, in this case, the Port of Bellingham, just waive.
Right, because then everybody who bid would
Do the same.
forget to sign their bid and wait and see how it worked out and then decide if they want it or not.
Okay, all right, thank you for that.
How many $800,000 bids have we had that haven't been signed? Or thereabouts? I mean, past history in the port, anyone?
Adam, you want to take a stab at it?
Frank, you would know if you're...
There's been bidder informalities over the years. Some of it depends kind of on the approach. So I'm going to give Mr. Fulton a pass because Mr. Seeger, his approach was that he did not waive informalities. It was his way of doing business. He said, look, we're not going to waive informalities. You make a mistake on your bid, we're not going to consider it. The other way is to kind of case-by-case basis, right? Well, the problem with case-by-case basis can be that you say, well, boy, this bid's 500,000 low, we'll waive the informality. This bid's only 100,000 low, we won't waive the informality. So Mr. Seeger, in his reign as the director of facilities, his tenure, said, I'm not going to generally waive informalities. I'm going to hold everybody. To put that in context, that's what WSDOT does. WSDOT does not waive informalities. You either did it right or you didn't do it right. It's a binary analysis. And so some places, I can tell you, I won't mention by name, but some governments in Washington, in Whatcom County, always waive informalities to get the lowest price. The problem is that then you have to judge each bid. So Mr. Seeger said no. So we occasionally would have one, but I would say one a year maybe, 70 projects. And typically Mr. Seeger would say, we're not going to waive informalities, we're going to move forward.
Did you have
I don't
something?
know if Mr. Fulton has a different view of the world or developed one yet.
Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I would beg to differ with Mr. Schnott. The informalities that we have taken historically to our legal counsel for advice are those where we have a question about the informality, but we have informalities all the time. And they are insignificant and in the sense that they're mathematical errors. We correct mathematical errors all the time. How many $800,000 bids, contractual bids have we had that have not been signed? This is the first I can recall in 24 years, frankly.
So, Adam, when you say differ with Frank, it would be more along the lines of you see them all the time, but rising to the level where you need counsel is not that often. Okay.
And don't get me wrong, I don't think the port should stand there before a bid opening. I've been in a lot of bid openings. They're a nervous time, especially when it's your money on the line. I don't expect you to ask everyone if they sign their bid. It's just that when you see something like this, it's so out of whack, it's concerning, and especially when it's a local company. But I'm not faulting the port that they did anything wrong. I was just more interested in the formality of how we do it.
So I guess I only see the ones that rise to the level, not the mathematical errors, which they correct, but typically, the ones we see, we don't waive the informality.
Is there anything further, Mr. Briscoe?
So if we waive the informality, if we were to do that, we could waive the not signing the bid? No, we can't do that, if I understand.
You could waive the informality and not sign the bid, but that would then subject the court to a claim that the low bidder had an unfair advantage because they're not bound by their bid.
So there's no point in time that when we open that bid and see it's not signed, we couldn't contact that company and say, hey, you forgot to sign your bid? That's not possible either?
No, there are some case laws out there that if you sign the bond and not the bid, you might be able to kind of work the angle, but generally speaking, that's one of the, there's a couple of them that are pretty clear cut. Not signing your bid's one, not submitting a bid bond is another, not within 24 hours providing the information on your electrical, HVAC, and plumbing contractors is a third one that is typically ones you can't waive. So I'd say those are the kind of three big ones that we see in our practice throughout the state where people make mistakes and are not waived.
Thank you.
Just so everyone's aware of the process, when we open a bid, it's not in advance. We open a bid with all the bids together. So depending on the luck of the draw, you could be the first bid opened or you could be the last bid opened. So the unsigned bid could have in fact seen everyone else's bid before theirs was even opened. And then theirs gets opened. That's the first we know hasn't been signed. We don't have any advance notice of that.
Thanks, Ron. Anything further, Dan?
No, good explanation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the background. I think a lot of people would be a little confused about it and why it rises to such a level of concern. So.
It's all designed to give a level playing, the bid statutes have two purposes under the law. One is to provide the lowest price to the government, and the second is to provide a level playing field for all bidders. Those are the two purposes of the public bid laws.
Yeah, I think the average person wouldn't care so much about the lowest price part because there's a history of problems with that. But the level playing field, I think most people would think that's a good thing, definitely. I do want to throw a little shout out to port staff and Rob because this getting more local contractors has been an issue, at least for me, and I think Dan's brought it up, and I'm sure that Mr. Briscoe will as well. But it's often difficult for smaller companies to break into this kind of business, working with a government. And I think we're the perfect one to try, and there may be some teething pains that go along with that. But I certainly want to say thank you for at least giving this a shot and bringing some smaller companies on board. So thanks again for that.
I agree with Commissioner McCauley.
All right, nothing further? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Carl. All right, next item, please, Diane.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Nations Roof Northwest LLC of Kent, Washington for the Bellingham Shipping Terminal Warehouse Number 1, re-roof, and Warehouse Number 2, roof repairs in the amount of $429,930.24, plus a 15% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $494,000, and increase budget line item number 187 from $461,933 to $530,000.
Hey, Adam, you know the cool thing about TPO is you can put a green roof on top of it even, so it's not the end of the world for me. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. First order of business, I'm Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. I'd like to introduce our newest engineer that helped me work on this project. His name's John Gibson. John comes to us from a local private company, and he's a carpenter in his former life, and has been an engineer in EIT, and he's looking to take his PE exam perhaps next year. And so we're really super glad to have him here. So I wanted to introduce him to you. These are our commissioners.
Welcome. Welcome.
All right. This is Warehouse 1 for those unfamiliar. This is at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, and Warehouse 1 is here. Wow. Let's go with that one. This is Warehouse 1 right there. And I guess the question that I would be asking if I was you is, why are we re-roofing this building now? The building has kind of been a part of a deferred maintenance, honestly. We've had different thoughts on that area of the shipping terminal and how it might be used. The Commission will recall that we spent a couple years introducing or considering the NOAA proposal, which would have wiped that building out and replaced it. Also, with the shipping terminal being reconfigured for module construction and getting that back into a revenue production mode, less for commodity shipping, more toward module construction, it was thought that the path to the water, with things being built back here, this would be our path to the water. And as we looked closer at it, we thought a better solution was to run things out to the water this way. And the reason for that is because then it gives three possible ways out to the water. Of course, anything along our pier, this is the heavy load section of the pier, as well as through the stub pier, which was just used last week to have a module go over top. And then a project for this year that we're going to take at least through design and permitting is the reconfiguring of the rail span and repurposing that to be a heavy capacity barge loadout facility. So you can see with the path of the water going here, suddenly it leaves Warehouse 1 out of harm's way. And so we want to get that back into revenue production. So the first thing we're going to do is repair the roof. Unfortunately, getting into the roof, getting into the roof, these red sections you see, this is Warehouse 1 right here, the outline approximately here. And these red sections are rotted sections of the car decking. It's a great big barrel roof, about 150 feet across, with great big bow trusses overhead, clear span. And what's happened is the roof, approximately right along this line, the roof material transitions from a built-up roofing to a 3-tab roofing, and there's a seam right there, as well as on this side right here. And it's that seam has been problematic apparently, and it's rotted out the car decking structure. So we estimated the project and got a budget in, and then went and when we started to really get into the project, we looked closer at that rot and really started to quantify it. And while we thought we did a pretty good estimate and a pretty conservative estimate, it just wasn't enough. And so thus the increase, we're asking for a 15% contingency. Right now our bid is $430,000. Note only $275 below the second bid, and then a third bid out like 5% from there. So really good bids. But $430,000 of a budget of $460,000 just gives us no room to react in case more rot is discovered. So one thing that's just a little bit atypical is the request for 15% contingency. Typically, we ask for 10% contingency, and historically, looking at all our contracts, we use 3 to 4% of that 10%, or 3 to 4%. We ask for 10. But this time, we're going to ask for a little bit more, just in case we have unpleasant discovery. It is the recommendation of the staff to approve this contract and move forward with re-roofing this warehouse. Do the commissioners have any questions?
How are you going to replace those rotten timbers? I mean, do they go all the way across the whole roof?
Yeah, we have 3 different repair scenarios, and where you see the red the heaviest, we actually drop that entire section to the ground and rebuild it.
Oh.
And we're not rebuilding it with in kind. What is up there are curved 3x6 car decking, and they all have a slight radius to them. So, coming up with that material would really drive the cost up. So what we're going to do is do a TJIs that are 14-inch tall, spanning between the bow trusses, and then redeck the top of that to match the profiles.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Mr. Briscoe.
Can you bring that picture up of the rotten area?
Certainly. There's one, and there's one.
The first one you just brought up, Adam.
Yeah.
So the curved decking you're speaking of is the stuff on top of the timber, correct?
That's correct. What you're seeing there is a 6x12. That's part of the bow truss right there, and then the car decking is running this way. And what's surprising about that is we'd all intuitively say, "Oh, here's the rot. It's this dark section," and then you get up there with a hammer and in parts, and it'll just sail right through the good part. So we actually put John up in a man lift for 3 days, and he went and tapped every board up there, and this red diagram you see here are the results of that, and we think we know what the rot is. But if you've ever remodeled an old house and you start getting into the walls, you can relate to where do we stop, sort of a thing. So.
And I assume that's all fir?
I believe it is. I believe it's a Doug fir number 1.
And you think 15% is enough for?
Well, we're not replacing it in kind. Recall, the replacement method is using today's materials that are far less expensive and more generic.
I guess I meant to say that you think you've got enough. Do you know where the rot's at? That 15% will. Rot spores have quick little feet.
Yeah, I appreciate the commissioner saying that and his sympathy toward the situation, but we think we've got it nailed, and we hope that 15%. We hope to use none of it, let alone 15%. So.
Okay, thank you, Adam.
Very welcome.
So nothing like giving the new guy an intern's job.
And a hammer.
Yeah. And maybe
test his metal just
with
a little bit.
A scratch all and a lift laying on it. Yeah, I've done that. How was your neck okay after that?
It was nice to be away from the desk.
Yes, I'm sure. So I had the same exact concern as Commissioner Briscoe, which is 15%. And feeling pretty good about that? Because I'd be willing to say let's be willing to spend a little more if needed. So do you feel okay about that one on this one? I mean, you'll come back and ask anyway, but. Right?
I do. The reason we get a contingency at all is because we don't want to badger the commission with little decisions. I do appreciate that offer. However, I feel comfortable with 15%. And if it's more than 50%, we have a problem, So
a quick question then. It's curved. How is the car decking curved? Why wouldn't it? It would seem like it would have been milled flat and just laid up there, right? I'm sure it's a tongue and groove product as well.
As you say that, I'm trying to think here. The car decking runs perpendicular to the curve, correct?
Uh-huh.
The
curve is produced by laminating 3 sheets of the Doug fir. And so bending each one of those, like on that gentle radius, and then gluing them together was what produced the curve. The curve runs from the bottom of the building up towards the peak, if that makes sense.
So what you're looking at with that picture, the skylight on the right is actually higher than the rotten spot that's shown on the left.
Uh-huh. Well, I know how the bow trusses are placed, and that's why I couldn't figure out how the car decking itself has a curve. Then it'd be like a compound curve where it's curved in two directions, but it's not. It's laid perpendicular to the bow trusses, so it's, 90 degrees to the truss. So unless it's taken off a curved shape over time, is that?
No, Commissioner, I've misspoken, and I didn't realize we were 90 degrees different than that. Is what you're seeing there, this, John, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that 4x12 or 6x12, whatever that is actually the rafter that spans between the trusses. And the trusses are running parallel with the car decking you're seeing.
Okay. Correct. All right, that makes more sense then.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I do apologize for that.
All right, so it actually is lengthwise laid up to the peak.
Yes.
From the edge to the, instead of what you think is a horizontal placement. Interesting. Huh, okay. Good luck. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But I was not kidding about the TPO being a great substrate for a living roof. Anything further?
Here is one bidder that is glad he signed his bid. $430,000 and $275 separates the winning bid from second place. Wow.
What's the percentage? That's close. I think it's a third of 1%. Commissioner, I do appreciate the joviality on that. However, I just want to give a nod out to KingWorks, our structural engineer, as well as to RMC Architects. When we have a great set of plans like that, as indicated by a very tight set of bids, that's what we want, because that tells us that people are looking at the same project and bidding the same thing. If they're wildly apart, it gets scary on what are they seeing. All three of the four lowest bidders are seeing the same project.
Yeah, great.
Two quick questions. The bow trusses seem to be okay?
They do.
No big
There's
issue?
a separation between those and the rafters.
Gotcha, okay. And then what color is going to be the TPO? Because right now it's pretty non-reflective.
It is gray. And we have choices on that, but we chose gray.
Okay.
0.06%.
Oh.
All right, anything further, gentlemen?
No.
All right. Okay, nothing? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Adam. And Diane, looks number 6. Are we on number 6? Yes, please.
A motion to authorize an additional $3,522,000 of contingency funds for the construction contract with American Construction Company to cover costs of increased quantities, excavation, debris, and dredge material for the Whatcom Waterway Phase 1 cleanup project for a total authorized amount of $35,306,755.86.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hergesheimer, Senior Project Engineer for the Port. This is a request. I appreciate the thoughts of the Commission on the last agenda item, because on this agenda item, we did not have a 10% contingency when we did a bid award. We had a 3% contingency going in. So this request is to increase that contingency by $3.5 million, or approximately another 10% over the bid cost. The reasons are threefold. They're all related to quantity increases of the material that's being found in the Whatcom Waterway, and they relate to dredging, to shoreline debris removal, and to shoreline excavation material. And I'll take each one of those in order. Basically, the request is to increase the contingency to the contract for American Construction to deal with the overruns in the bid quantity for these particularly these three main items. And I'll take these in order that I've listed in the memorandum, but to do that, I'd like to introduce Tom Wang, who's a principal partner of Anchor QEA, who is responsible for the designing, the bidding, and the construction management of the project, to to address some of the reasons on the primary cost overrun, which is, as you see, is a projected approximately projected 20,000 cubic yards of additional dredge material that amounts to a total of approximately a little over $3 million of cost. And the reason the cost is so high is the unit price, combined unit price for these two bid items for dredging and in-water transportation and dredge spoil offloading and disposal at an upland facility is $152, a little over $152 per yard. So 20,000 yards at $150 a yard is $3 million. So it adds up very quickly. And there are two other items I will address after that. They're related to quantity changes. One's a decrease and the other is an increase, quite substantial in the material that we've been pulling out along the shoreline. That's buried or was buried in the shoreline. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tom and have him address the dredging work that was done and the difference in the bathymetry of the pre-construction and post-construction work. Tom?
Thank you, Commissioners. John will probably operate this thing since I don't know how to use it. But in terms of the context, one of the things that we should step back is the work, a lot of the design work was based on the 2008 bathymetry survey. So the survey of the waterways that was completed in about 2008. At the time in 2008, and then the subsequent completion of the design work, when this was ready to go out to bid in about 2000, I believe in 2012 or so. And what occurred at that time frame is that from the permitting side, to get tribal concurrence, the Corps of Engineers held up the permits. So for approximately almost 2 construction seasons, we weren't able to have the permits. And so the project was kind of placed on hold until such time that the permits were in place. So the 2008, we always knew and communicated to, again, this work is 100% funded by AIG and the state of Washington. So in communications with them, we informed them that as the project was delayed, the volumes would increase. When we went out to finally got authorization in January of last year, the Corps finally had issuance of their permits. At that point, in order to hit the construction window for this year, the port and we discussed from a timing perspective, how do we get the bid out basically in about a month and a half period. So in order to do that, one of the things we wanted to do was update the volumes because we know there's a substantial sedimentation that occurs within the waterway year to year. So from 2008, we did a pre-construction survey in early February of 2015. That pre-construction survey was not able to get full coverage of the waterway unlike 2008, partly due to the time, but also because of vessels moored at the BST berth. Both berths were taken up at the time. And then other barges and other structures that were in the waterway that the surveyors weren't able to get around. So this is a picture of the yellow areas kind of represent areas that the surveyor wasn't able to actually survey at the time. Because of this information, what we did to supplement that data was basically use the older 2008 information. So all parties going in, AIG, the state, the port, and ourselves understood that the volumes would be different than the volumes that were placed in the bid documents. And the intent there was then to go and place the bid out quickly so we could go and get into construction in 2015. And the way to do that was that in the engineer's estimate, we said we should have a larger contingency built into the bid so that we could understand the true value. And so the numbers that the engineer's estimate that we prepared came out to a total bid, including 15% contingency, for a total bid value of about $37 million. About $5 million of that was for contingency to address some of the volume, and then also, as John indicated, there's a lot of uncertainty when you're dealing with very old shorelines and structures what the subsurface conditions are, how much debris is actually below, because we have no way of accurately determining what the volumes of, say, concrete debris or other things that have been poured in the shoreline over the many decades. So the bid volume that went out on the street, we knew was underrun, but we tried to account for that in terms of, again, the larger contingency. So that number was in the port's 2016 budget for a total of almost about 15% contingency. However, the bid itself only carried, I think, about a 3% contingency. So the contractor's base bid came in under the engineer's cost estimate base bid, about $30 million versus $32 million. But we were holding a smaller contingency, which was intended to address the unknowns associated with the quantities and so forth. So this figure, again, just kind of represents the areas that the surveyors, both American, the contractor surveyors, and the pre-construction survey that was done by the port, that we were unable to collect any information and therefore used 2008 data. We did not anticipate that we would have as much sedimentation within those unknown areas as we did have. When we look at those areas and how much they actually did change, they changed on the order of 3 to 4 feet in terms of sedimentation from the 2008 survey to now. We expected there to be an increase, a significant increase, but not that much. So the quantities that John indicates, about 20,000 cubic yards extra, includes about 14,000 cubic yards, which is accounted by the difference in the surveys over the time period, as well as an additional contingency for contingency redredging. If we dredge in these cleanup areas and we don't achieve, or we find that there's still contamination left behind in certain areas that we're supposed to dredge down to a clean layer, we may be required to go back out there and then remove some additional volume. Now, the hope is from the data that we've collected that we won't have to do any contingency redredging. So of the 20,000, that is a maximum amount that we believe represents the maximum total volume that possibly could occur, both from the change in the bathymetry over the years, as well as any contingency redredging that may occur. Do you see the other figure? Stepping back to in the January, February timeframe of 2015, when the survey was completed, in order to try to, again, get it out to that construction season, we needed to get the bid out very quickly. And so one of the things that we made a decision with the port on was to use the footprint of the 2008 design, or the design that was based on the 2008 survey, to determine what that pre-bid volume was, and then use a higher contingency than 10%, 15% to account for that difference in volume. This map is the inner waterway, so this is about half of the dredge area. So in this portion of the dredge area, this is where a lot of the change in the footprint occurred. It's a kind of the funny line. The yellow represents basically the original design, and that design is what was used to develop the volumes for the bid. In order to redesign all the surfaces, because there's a lot of shoreline connections and everything else, that would have taken another month or longer in terms of redesigning all of the surfaces for the design volumes, which would have meant we would have missed a construction window. So in discussions together with John and the port and the state Department of Ecology, it was decided that we wanted to hit this construction window. There's funding from the state side that was available, and because of that, we wanted to go out quickly and so try to address, the known changes in quantities as part of a contingency. So that's part of the ask today, is to increase the contingency to cover that amount. But the yellow area represents the original footprint of required dredging, and the red represents those areas due to the changes in bathymetry from the 2008 survey through the 2015 timeframe, how the area has expanded. And partly the agreement with ecology is in the inner waterway. There is a combination of cleanup and also to provide for navigation purposes in the future. And so the elevation that was established for removing all of the contaminated materials, because there's still contaminated materials below, in this area below it, and they just will be covered by clean material and capped using armoring materials to prevent any of that contaminated sediments from coming to the surface. But the footprint increased, and this line represents the minus 24 mean low water contour line. And so as sedimentation has, encroached within the waterway from Whatcom Creek, it's expanded the overall footprint, which unfortunately has increased the volumes quite a bit.
Thanks, Tom. I wanted to point out, as Tom said, the original footprint and the original elevation cut of the inner waterway has not changed from the beginning, from the permit requirements. There's still a cut of down to minus 24 flat across the waterway, and then it gets sloped up on both sides where it meets the shoreline. That has not changed, but what has happened as you get more volume on top and you make the cut line go further across, it has to go further across to get that added quantity that's now been loaded on the top. So basically, I want you to be aware that cut line, the original cut line, has not changed. It's just because the added quantity has increased the area in the red there that needs to be removed under the original permit conditions to a minus 24, and then there's a cap that goes on top of that of about 4 feet to get us up to about minus 20 as the navigation top of cap layer navigation dredge depth, which allows us another 2 feet up to a minus 18, which was the target elevation. And that additional 2 feet then was set to provide maintenance dredging in the future and not have to deal with dredging into the cap, but let that siltation occur. And then if it increases above that, then there'd be opportunity to go back and redredge as the Whatcom Creek and the Nooksack River keep adding sediment to this area. So that's the dredge area. Do you have any questions on the dredging? We'll take these kind of one at a time. And the dredging being the primary quantity increase and cost increase. Are there any questions for Tom or I on that?
The red area, the dredge footprint increase, and up towards the creek, towards the head of the waterway, that has not been done yet, correct? That hasn't been taken out of there.
The dredging in the inner waterway, this portion, this has been completed. Most of this is completed. The work that hasn't been completed yet is the BST area, which is further toward the mouth. In that area, one of the things also, I believe, in the commission memo is that we have been actively working with ecology to see if in some areas, to reduce the overall volume that's removed, there appears to be some areas where the contractor, when they started digging, they were finding native material or a clay layer at a higher elevation than the design to remove all of the contaminants. So in the inner waterway, all of that material, there's still contamination below that footprint. In the BST area, the idea for the BST area, the agreement with ecology is to remove all of the contaminants. So there's some areas that appear to be that the contamination is not as deep as we had it designed. And so we've collected some additional data this last week that we're waiting for results this week that will help us determine if we can come up and then leave some material behind, which has the potential of saving about 5,000 of those 14,000 yards that we're estimating that we're going to be increasing.
So, Tom, could you also save money by not having to cap that area since it's native and apparently, pre-18 something sediments, right?
In the inner waterway, actually, contamination in this portion that we showed, there still exists below minus 24.
Yes, thanks to the city of Bellingham's dredging in 1901, which is so deep that it's
which
crazy.
Is very deep, right? And
yes.
Everything that accumulates, that's correct. In the BST area, the objective there is to get to the bottom of contamination, and we think that there is a good possibility that we won't have to dig as deep in some of those areas and save some volume that way.
So since we're talking about the dredging, I'm going to put everybody on the spot here a little bit, and it's everybody being you two. We know what the Army Corps of Engineers dug the outer waterway to in the early part of the 20th century, so late 1800s, early 1900s. Couldn't we assume that would be a known depth of clean sediments, and you could just go to that point and have a solid knowledge that that's exactly where you needed to go to before you started any work at all?
That's part of the design. So in looking at, to develop what we call the dredge prism and then the depth of contamination, we use different types of information. One of them was the core information, and their surveys aren't very, it sounds like you're very familiar with them. They're condition surveys, and so they're not very detailed. And the core was supposed to dredge a navigation area to a certain depth. So we get that information, we overlay that along with a lot of cores that were taken, and the cores we determined through looking at intervals how deep that contamination does go to. So those are different ways of verifying basically whether or not we've got to the bottom of contamination. The areas that we're talking about potentially saving were actually outside of the Corps' navigation channel, just on the very north end. So it's on the edge and the boundaries outside of the navigation channel. And in that area, to be a little conservative, because on cleanup projects you kind of tend to be, we did extend some of the Corps' elevations to capture those depths. But it turns out that in those areas, when we've started dredging in those areas, they appear that we're hitting some cleaner, like more consolidated materials and clean materials at a higher elevation than what we've designed for the required removal. So that's where we're going back, and we've done some additional coring and working with ecology to say, can we not dig as much in those areas?
Okay, so we can save a little there. I'm a little frustrated with one part of this whole problem, well, two actually. One is the commission had been told in the past that the typical sedimentation in this area is about 1 centimeter per year, which I have been sharing for several years with people who ask. 3 to 4 feet is significantly more than 1 centimeter per year over the time period 2008 to 2015. Can you describe what happened and why?
We haven't done a sedimentation analysis, but I know just from my experience before, I mean, one of the issues that may have occurred underneath the berth area in that area is because you have some side slopes that head up toward that area. You tend to see a lot more, while the average waterway deposition rate may be low, through just the sedimentation patterns, the circulation patterns of the water, some stuff can accumulate in areas, especially areas that have lower energy. There's been a vessel usually moored in that area since before 2008. And that may have created kind of a low energy environment where, if sediment gets into that area, instead of it continuing to move along, it just settled out. So we were surprised to see as much sedimentation in those areas that we found.
Okay.
And we did not find that out until basically just recently when those vessels were moved so that American could go in and actually survey those areas.
So moving the vessels for the additional survey, in hindsight, would have been a good idea. Some costs associated with it, no doubt. But that aside, the inner waterway does not have a survey gap. So how do we explain in the red areas the additional material needed to be removed there that wasn't caught in the second survey, 2015?
And I'm sorry, Commissioners, I probably wasn't clear when I explained earlier. The yellow area was what we used to then relook at the volumes associated in February of 2015 after we got the survey. And the reason that we didn't include the red areas, we knew that it was expanding. But the reason we didn't do it is that would have required a redesign of all of the surfaces in inner waterway, which is, once you get in the shoreline areas, unfortunately, it's a very complex, it's a three-dimensional computer-aided drafting model. So we would have had to redesign the entire waterway, not just the red areas, in order to capture what the true volumes would be. And that would have basically delayed the bid for a year. So the decision was made at the time to account for it more in the contingency numbers in the engineer's estimate rather than redesign the entire waterway to come up with the new volumes.
So, but if you dig more, you still have to redesign it, but you're just doing it on the fly. So the only thing that's changed is that you didn't have to redesign it before the project went to bid, therefore slowing down the bid, but you still had to redesign it.
Yes, I mean, ultimately, after the bid was done, we have redesigned it to look to basically capture all of the shorelines to make sure it all was tied in.
Okay.
So the plans were redesigned, but that was done after the bid. That's
okay.
correct.
And then the assumption being that you knew before the bid you'd have to redesign it, but the contingency expected was just not high enough or needed.
The contingency has been accounted for, I think, as part of the communications with AIG and the state, the funding agencies. And then in the port's budget, the larger contingency was used. For the bid itself that went out, the contingency was only 3%, but it's been carried at the higher 15%
Sure.
for all of the other reports.
Sure, all right, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So my concern on this isn't that it changed, and I think like the BST roof, there's an expectation that things will change. It happens in my job every day, I get it. My concern, though, is that even though AIG and potentially the state are paying for this, every dollar we pull out of AIG is a dollar we can't spend on the rest of the cleanup. So this is actually a pretty significant number, because it would be about half of the cost, so another $1.5 million from AIG, which cannot be applied because there's a set number that is coming from that particular insurance policy. So this is $1.5 million we spend here that we can't spend somewhere else now. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. It goes against that bank account balance. But it is important to note that even though the quantities have increased, we wouldn't have changed the design of where the dredge limits are, right? Because those are set by factors that the port selected to have a navigable channel after cleanup, which is the -20 zone. So it's just that material is piled up on top, and a lot of that was right up here. The Whatcom Waterway comes out.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot more increase right in that zone, and then and that was a major one on that side. Then on this side, that I drew before. This is the area that was originally designed to go down to clean material, and still is in the BST Berth 1 area. The BST Berth 2 area only goes down to a certain elevation, -32, in order to restore some navigation dredge depth there, and also perform the first phase of cleanup by taking that first layer off the top. So that's where there's potential savings, as Tom was speaking about. It's kind of in this area I'm filling in right there. It's the outer part of the Berth 1, the navigational channel, where they're appearing to hit clay. So there's a potential that a 2-foot savings, if that's what it comes out to, 1.5 foot, 2-foot savings, that's maybe 5,000 to 6,000 yards, which is, that's $750,000.
Sure.
So it's a big number. So we're still working on trying to get those quantities to come further and more in line, but still meet all the permit parameters.
Okay.
For taking that down to clean.
Rob, quick question. Do you, rough numbers, what's the total payout from AIG on this, the total for everything that they're in for?
$106 million?
Just the AIG portion.
$106 million, I believe. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's half of that. It'd be half of that. So it'd be 64, around 62.
50-something, 55?
We've got a chart on this.
56 plus 25.
Half of it, all right.
So 28 plus 25, is that what you're saying?
53.
So 53.
So just this one overage, that's almost 3% of everything that AIG's got putting into this. That's kind of a big number overall.
Yeah,
So,
I think
okay.
we'll find that the nature of cleanups were like that.
Yep.
The cell building, the mercury cleanup, that came in considerably higher because
Yep.
you're chasing a product that's in the ground and basically running away from you as you're
Well, I think
chasing it,
you're saying it right this minute. My concerns are that all of these things may be more expensive by a few percentage points, in which case there may have to be some extreme creativity moving forward. Not necessarily, or not, I shouldn't say, not allowed that we could, that's a terrible way to put it. We can't do it less. We can't do less, right? But the creativity may have to come into play with actually what's done and the methods that are used, because if we keep chipping away at a few percentage points, pretty soon we're into real big numbers.
Well, that's absolutely
Yeah.
correct. And some of the cleanups that were done actually have come in substantially under budget. The Bunker C project we did by the clarifier came in about 2/3 of the original bid price because the quantities were less. So, and then we have another Bunker C going on right now. So the other two components, real quickly then, are the shoreline debris removal. That actually has decreased you'll see the bid items 8, 9, and 10. Some of them are decreasing, some of them are increasing. Again, that's totally a function of working along the previously disturbed and industrialized shoreline, mainly the shoreline area here of the Whatcom Waterway. All the way along here, we ran into a considerable amount of large concrete pours or old concrete structures that were either constructed in place or dumped there on the shoreline in the past and then buried. And also a lot of old piling in that area. So those have contributed to those features in bid items 8, 9, and 10. Fortunately for that, we see a decrease of about $115,000 because of the quantity changes. But in the upland excavation, which is also associated with both the north shoreline and the south shoreline around the clarifier used to be right there. There's a big hole in the ground right now where it used to be. The primary concern there is, you'll see on bid item number 7, the upland excavation and landfill disposal. We're excavating in partly clean and partly contaminated soil, and so there was a estimate used to figure out how much of that should be clean and how much should be contaminated. Well, we ran into a lot more contamination up in the central waterfront area where the C Street Terminal, the BMI area along there where the old Chevron fuel facility was, and so we could not reuse that as clean material. That has to get hauled out, and you'll see the price to haul it out, dispose of it upland, is $100 a ton, and the price to excavate it and reuse it is 75% of that number. So those grow pretty quickly. So that's where those numbers came from, and that resulted in an overall increase between those two items of about $400,000 to add to the dredging number. So that's why we are looking at needing another approximately $3.5 million in contingency to pay for the work to remove this material from the waterway.
Is that it, John?
That's it.
You have more? Okay. Bobby?
So all of these items, bid item 8, 9, 10, these are all separate bids, if I understand it?
These are all separate bid items in the contract. It's a unit price contract, so each bid item has its own contractor.
And any cost savings, we get to recoup. Any cost overruns, we get to pay.
Correct.
Is how the contract was written.
We'll pay less or pay more.
I just want to clarify it in my mind.
It's not the port, though.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I understand. It's not our money, but it's somebody's money. Sure. And then we had a 15% contingency in there to begin with.
The 15% contingency that was in there was for the budgeting purposes for the overall project when we went to AIG and MOTCA and saying, this is our project, let's make sure there's enough money in there and to lock up those funds, right? But when we go into the bid process, then we set our own contingency based on what we think we know at the time of the bid.
And that was?
And that was $1 million, which is 3%.
3%, and it came out to be a little over 10, or about 10%.
Correct.
Is the overall cost. And I understand this is going to be paid 50% from AIG and 50% from MODCA, but it's still coming from someone's paying for it. And I'm not trying to chastise the port for having this happen, but and it's understandable. And I'm going to be voting in favor of the approving the additional cost. But it certainly is frustrating. But I don't think there's anything we would do different. We've got a lot of other waterways we're going to clean up. Is there anything we'd do different in the future to get these bids closer?
Well,
from what we've learned at this point?
I think that It took so long to get this project from, January 2008 is when Anchors first started to work on the bid for this project, and to get a permit in 2015, that's 7 years. And so a lot can happen in 7 years. And what I think we've seen is a lot happened in the waterway in 7 years to make that happen. What I would like to see is be able to somehow fast track this process faster between permit and actually bid. And we don't have control of that. That's, it's a permit process, public process that happens.
And I appreciate you saying that, but I'm afraid down the road it might even take longer, not shorter in the future, because we're going to, without the MODCA money, we're going to go out in steps on different bids and design, and it could take longer, so we could be farther off in the future.
That's true. I know when we went into the recommendation for the $1 million contingency, when we first went in, and as we thought, okay, it's a $31 million project. Do we really want to put a 10% contingency on that at the time of bid award? And the decision was made, no, let's back that down. $1 million is still a lot of money. And
so that brings up another question. Is there any chance that the MODCA funding or AIG are going to say they won't cover this?
I don't believe there is any grounds for that. We are operating in the permit, according to the permit that was issued.
They didn't have a contingency cap?
Well, as Tom has indicated, the budget that they've seen is higher than our current contract.
So our current contract is 31 million, but we're going to add another 3.5 million here. So you're saying they're higher than 36 million?
Yeah.
How, 37, how high is it?
The number that they've gotten, I believe, is about the 37. They've seen the engineer's cost estimate that was provided to them as part of the engineer's design report. And so the engineer's estimate is what the AIG and the state use for their planning purposes. So that was the $37 million number. I think for port planning purposes, that number's been used as well for planning purposes, but for bidding purposes, it was the lower contingency that was applied. And so I know that AIG and the state, we've been in communications with them the entire time about this. They were fully aware of the volume discrepancies that were going to occur when we went out to bid, and we've been working with them so that there's not going to be any surprises on their end. So,
but anything over 37 million can now be on our dime?
Let me speak to that. So the answer is no.
That's a good answer.
The AIG is just going to get, it comes out of a pot. It's the MODCA funding I think we're really concerned about, right?
I'm concerned if there's going to be anyone that's going to say no if it runs higher.
As a practical matter, there is an upward limit of AIG's responsibility for this project. And there's a cap on this particular project. We're not close to that. But AIG is obligated for whatever it costs or whatever ecology changes by order. In other words, if ecology changes, you got to do something different, then AIG has to pay. I will say port staff, particularly Alan Birdsall, works very closely with AIG on like a weekly, if not basis, to keep them informed about the project. And so AIG knows, Commissioner, what you said, that although it's AIG's money, this commission treats it like its own money. And so to answer your question, no. If the cost continues to go up, AIG has to, so long as it's within the policy, AIG has to pay their share. To Commissioner McCauley's point, you're absolutely right. At some point, the state could say, we no longer have enough money. But Brian Gowan can speak to that. That's kind of a remote possibility, I suppose.
Yeah, that's correct. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Programs. Yeah, everything Frank just summarized is exactly right. And then additionally, we do have an existing grant with the state, with the Department of Ecology, that has more than enough to cover this contingency for Whatcom Waterway. It also has an existing grant. We also have an existing grant for the Central Waterfront site, which some of this work is being done for in conjunction with. So there's multiple pots of money, and we're tracking this really closely. We work directly with AIG daily almost when we have things like this come up. They're actively involved. So these are all being tracked very closely, and the existing grant capacity is there. If this really changed significantly and doubled, we would be in maybe a little bit different situation.
So I'm a little confused on that point. So the original engineer's estimates assumed that the 3% contingency would be okay, but for some reason Ecology thought it should be higher, so there's more money than we expected that's available for this?
Well, going back in time, when we first acquired the Georgia Pacific property, if you recall when Jim Pendowski came up and spoke to the commission in October, he's the Toxic Cleanup Program Director at Department of Ecology. The Ecology went all in to commit to Bellingham, and that's why he said he felt really bad about this current situation, was that that there was an acknowledgement that this was a project that was going to take a significant amount of funding, including front-loading the project as much as possible. So if you recall, this is phase one of the Whatcom Waterway cleanup. So we have full funding for phase one. We'd have additional capacity in existing grant agreement, not enough to complete the next phase of work, but definitely enough that could cover a contingency increase similar to this. So there's a multiple grant agreements that we can use to fund these projects. It doesn't cover all of the cleanup that we need to do, but it is enough for this current situation.
So why would Ecology allocate more money than expected to the Whatcom Waterway cleanup?
Well, that original plan was to do one project rather than two phases. So we had over multiple bienniums had been getting grant agreements with the Department of Ecology to fund that initial first project, which has now been broken into two phases. So we have funding for phase one, which we're underway with, and then we have some funding that would have carried us into phase two, but and that's kind of where we have that buffer right now. Does that make sense?
Describe, based on this image, what phase one and phase two would be, according to Department of Ecology, is that understanding?
Phase one of the Whatcom Waterway project is the current image, and that's the current project. There'll be additional dredging in phase two in the outer waterway to the right of berth 2. They'll be addressing the ASB and that portion of the cleanup, and then ongoing monitoring throughout the Bellingham Bay as well.
So the additional dredge, maybe back to John and Tom, the additional dredge needed here doesn't include the berth 2, just berth 1?
Oh, I thought that doesn't include berth 2?
The project that we're currently underway with phase one is berth 1 and the yellow, basically the little yellow area of berth 2. So berth 2 is basically a cut down to minus 32, okay, just to shave off that, get navigation depth, get the first layer of contamination out, but it does not go down all the way that it would do in berth 1. So berth 1, the design elevation is like minus 40, and in berth 2, it would be probably minus 40, but right now it's minus 32, just because it's part of a next phase being done in this phase.
Do you have a question about it?
I want to see if I followed you correctly. Are berth 1 and berth 2 going to be the same depth when it's all finished?
No, sir. Not under phase 1. Under the phase 1 berth, let me erase that. So berth 1 is this area here, and it's basically going to be down to clean material, fully dredged out to clean material, and there's some small elevation differences, but it's basically minus 40, okay? And then in phase 1, berth 2, this much of berth 2 is going to be taken down to minus 32 under this cleanup scenario. And
the limit, the hatched limit is actually what's being dredged in berth 2.
That's right.
Yeah, it's just right at the toe of the slope.
It's right
where there's been a lot of accumulation there, so that vessels can get in at 32. But But it's just that small area along Berth 2 that would be dredged to 32. And that was to Ecology's intent to help accommodate a future cleanup, basically, of that area. One of the problems is that there's so much accumulation in that area along the toe that if you were to cut the full depth in Berth 2, it would be probably about a 10-foot cut, which would create structural instability issues. So the way to facilitate the cleanup in phase 2 of this project is to take some of it out now and then come back later as the slope stabilizes and then remove the rest of it, because there's under-pier contamination that would be addressed as part of phase 2 as well.
Thank you.
So then phase 2 cleanup, just to be clear, is going to be the navigational channel out as far as it needs to go to get that down to clean.
Does that take Berth 2 down to 40 feet as well?
I believe it's in that range, yes.
Yes.
And then it's also the entire ASB.
And is that in this $31 million bid?
No, sir, that's phase 2. That's not out to bid, hasn't been fully funded by Ecology yet.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm speaking for all three of us up here. We don't spend and have not spent as much time on this, so I appreciate your patience with our questions on this particular issue. I'm very, very nervous about state funding of Ecology's grants, and at some point it would seem that even with an agreed order, that Ecology could still plead that there's no money. It's maybe, Frank, you might address this. Is there a scenario where they are literally not able to pay, and then what would happen?
That is both a legal and a political question. The legal aspect of it is we signed a consent decree for phase 1, so we're legally obligated to complete phase 1. That consent decree does not link to a grant because Ecology will not link those two things together. So recall that there's somewhat of a business relationship with Ecology where we'll say we'll sign a consent decree, they say we have a grant. But they don't link those together. Governments have been asking them to link those together, and Ecology's been reluctant to do that over the last decade because then private industry would say, hey, we can't afford it, so we're going to get a delay in our consent. Once we sign our consent decree, if we can't afford it, we get a delay. So now that the world has changed, it'll be interesting to see what happens around the state with the next round of consent decrees to governments where they can't guarantee the funding. If that makes sense.
Can Ecology force the port to continue work even though they aren't funding it?
Theoretically, they could go to court and force the port to continue the work even though they are not funding it. However, by the time that got sorted out, there will have been a couple of bienniums of legislative action.
So it's theoretical possibilities, but okay, a lot of political things happen in between.
I'm saying it's largely a political question. What Ecology has told us is this project, phase 1, is going to be fully funded from their grant cash flow. And I think what Brian Gowan's saying is we'll even let you take some money from that we had allocated to phase 2 and push it into phase 1 if you need it.
Mm-hmm. All right. I mean, we make decisions that have long-term ramifications. For example, we're going to put money in the shipping terminal, right? It should last another half century at least. I'm just going to guess. All right. So regardless of what Ecology does 3 years from now, it can have ramifications that are long, long term. And in order, I think, for us to make these long-term decisions, we have to know that we can do these things. And relying on the state, which is unreliable right now, is a little nerve-wracking, at least for me. So Whatcom Waterway phase 1 is, we got the funding. Everything after that, we're still maybe a little in the air.
Yeah, that's correct. We will be looking at all these projects individually on a case-by-case basis, depending on where they're at, both from a legal standpoint, from a funding mechanism, and from a business need, and kind of how the port-wide decision on the project itself. So it's definitely a changed set of scenarios, and it might be reflected in how some of these legal agreements in the future come forward. And each one of them, as we bring them to the commission for bid award or for entering into an agreed order or consent decree, we'll want to walk through those risks in and out with you as well.
And Commissioners, I might add that the Department of Ecology is working very closely, not only with the Port of Bellingham, but with the port industry to address this issue.
Mm-hmm.
This issue was visited on them, of course, by the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are, have always been, I think it's fair to say, a very good business partner of the port, and they're continuing to keep us appraised. And I hear it from the legal side. I think Brian hears it from the grant side. We're going to work with you guys. We're going to keep moving these cleanups forward.
Sure. And I know that the folks in ecology, their hearts are, I'm sure, like everybody here, they're in the right place. But without this funding, then this commission and future commissions have to figure out, with a $7 million tax take and not a lot of money that we can borrow, how to invest and where to invest in the future, because some of these things just may not happen. All right.
What concerns me is the berth 1, which is inland, is going to be 40 feet deep, and berth 2 is only going to be 32 feet deep. And hopefully we'll be able to dredge that as well, but don't we need 40 feet overall? I guess that's a marine question, but don't we need, I mean, what good's it do to dredge it to 40 feet and leave the other at 32? And if we don't get the funding, it could be there for a long time.
Dan Stahl, Maritime Director. You raise a good question, and we will, at the terminal, we'll just need to deal with the depth that we've got. This project will get us more depth than we currently have. That's good news, because the vessels have gotten larger, and we'll probably end up just hanging the vessels off the pier on the up creek side of the Whatcom Waterway, and just using to the best advantage the depth that we have.
So, Dan, the length there, what's the overall length of the what's labeled as BST dock from end to end?
1,300 feet, roughly.
So you've got 500-600 feet available at 40 feet in depth? Okay. And you said vessels have gotten larger. We are not getting anything near what the Panama Canal is handling. So what does 600 feet do? Is that enough length, or are you just going to hang the tail off of one end or something like that?
It will always come down to the particular vessel that gets nominated for the cargo coming out of here. A lot of what we're seeing now is interest in the module work, which typically moves on barges, so you don't have that draft restriction. At 40 feet deep and 600 feet long, you can do a lot with Handymax, not quite Panamax vessels, but there's a lot of tonnage that can make that kind of envelope.
And Handymax are crossing oceans, they're not just intracoastal?
Oh, correct.
Okay.
And that's the typical kind of vessel that you see working in the smaller break bulk ports in Puget Sound and Columbia River. Pretty typical vessel that we see.
Okay, all right.
On berth 2, what is the time frame before you could redredge there for that slope to be stable?
Well, generally, I believe berth 2 would be taking off approximately like 4 to 5, 6 feet this time. And normally that would be, you'd wait a couple of years before you would want to go back to let some of that material from the underpier come out. But as part of the Phase 2 overall project, the characterization work would have to be done to get the funding to characterize the rest of berth 2, the underpier areas, because all of that would be included as part of a Phase 2 remediation project.
So outside, how far out does our slope go at 32 feet? How far outside the main pier are we going to extend and be at the 32-foot draft level?
It gets cut off the top, and so it's deeper as you go further out.
That's what I'm saying. How far out before we gain our full depth of 40? Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
How many are we? Ship width? Are we half a ship width? Where are we at?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the elevations are off the top of my head out beyond where the ship is currently right now. The horizon is, a 90-foot wide vessel out here like that. The reason it's shaved 32 is just to take that layer off and it slopes away.
Right.
So it slopes from 32 down to 36, 38 potentially. But I don't know what that distance is.
Okay. Thank you.
I can get that for you, though.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
How deep is it in the middle of the channel right out from berth 2? What's the maximum depth?
It's actually shallower than 40. 40 is the deepest you'll see anywhere along the channel, including the incoming channel. So in order for ships to get in, the deepest water is at berth 1, and they have to transverse through shallow water in Bellingham Bay to get to that spot. So, you know, I believe the Bellingham Bay area is somewhere around 35 to 38, generally, offshore from the berth.
And the Corps is not engaged in this at all, as far as dredging this, because this is still in the Corps' purview, is it not? Yeah, it's a federal channel.
It is a federal channel. They just have not been very quick to respond to dredge requests.
Not very accommodating, is what you're
So
saying.
Commissioners, the dredging in the United States is done by a bill passed by Congress called WRDA. And there is something in the neighborhood, somebody can correct me, like 5,000 miles of channel that needs to be dredged. And Congress has a say in how they allocate the money they have for dredging. And it's somewhat based upon demonstrated tonnage at a certain location. So as you can imagine, the Mississippi River and the Mississippi Delta eat up a lot of the dredge WRDA funds.
Columbia.
And the Columbia River. So we participate in WRDA discussions, and you know that's where the dredging of these channels is kind of set. So there's obviously more channel than money in the United States to dredge.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Briscoe's question. Why are we dredging to 40 feet when we have to come across 32 feet to get in there?
So I want to chime in here, and I may have some wrong information. I apologize. On my old phone, I had notes as to what our authorized depths were all throughout the port. I don't believe we're authorized to 40 feet anywhere. I think in this area we're authorized to 36, possibly 38 feet. So there's a bit of an overdredge going on here, but that's part of the problem is we're only authorized to go to 38, and you go out in Bellingham Bay and it's at 36 to 38 feet. So you're right. If you have a ship that's drawing 40, it's not going to be able to get into the berth anyway. So there's a bit of an overdredge here, which allows it to silt back in without having to come in and re-dredge it right away. I think that might be what's going on here.
Well, it's that, and it's also the historic dredge depth for when GP dredged this area was down to about the minus 38 level, right? And so you're assuming there's contamination happening, so you dredge, because of cleanup action, we're dredging down to at least minus 38 to get down to the historic dredge depths, get all the contamination out. And then there's a potentially 2-foot buffer to go below that. That may have been contaminated. And that's what we're checking now, is to see how much of that 2-foot buffer is actually contaminated or how much can remain.
So it's not the depth of the water to take a 40-foot boat. You're digging down that deep in order to get rid of the contaminants, and that makes sense.
Correct, because that's where the historic dredge depth.
Thank you very much for that explanation.
And then how far will we cap? What will it, when we're all done, what will be the depth?
In this zone, because we're going down to clean,
There's no cap.
there's like a 6-inch residuals management layer, which is a sand layer, which kind of anything that filters out after the dredging is done and sits on the surface, it gets capped over to keep that out of the biotic community as a protection, but it's just 6 inches.
Okay, well, I misunderstood. I thought we were putting rock there for the tugs pushing or what have you, not to.
That is correct, but that's on the inner waterway.
Okay.
And that's because we're at minus 20 at the final elevation.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so the commissioners, there's an authorized depth in the channel, and we actually went to the Corps of Engineers because of the necessity to get to clean soil, got authorization to go below the authorized depth of the channel and get to clean soil, and that's what got you to minus 40.
Sorry to labor this. Thanks for the explanations.
All very good questions and very well thought out. So I appreciate your questions on this. And I anticipated there would be quite a bit.
This many questions, John?
Oh, yeah.
We're nearly
Go for another half hour.
45 minutes on this one.
Well, thank you for your patience explaining them.
Just for my own thinking, because I try to freak out about things that aren't going to happen for a long time. The Army Corps of Engineers is probably unlikely to ever come back and dredge this. Can I just assume that? Would that just be a safe assumption? I see some head shaking. Okay, all right. So, because if we're going to want the shipping terminal, we being the public, this community, Whatcom County, then we just have to know that this is money that we're going to have to come up with in the future. So, okay. All right. Anything further?
No more questions.
Diane? All right. Would you read the action item again, please, Diane, just so everybody's heard it one more time?
A motion to authorize an additional $3,522,000 of contingency funds for the construction contract with American Construction Company to cover costs of increased quantities, excavation, debris, and dredge material for the Watcom Waterway Phase 1 cleanup project for a total authorized amount of $35,306,755.86.
All right, Dan, anything further? No. Bobby? All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you, Commissioners, and I do want to point out that we are working hard to figure out how to reduce that ask, but what we wanted to do is not come back again, but try to cap it at what the maximum potential could be. So we'll be reporting later what the final came out to be. And just for your information, the schedule-wise, the dredging is going to be completed by the middle of February and the capping by the middle of March under our permit conditions. So we'll know very quickly in the next couple of months of where we've landed on the total quantity. Thank you.
Thank you,
John, how realistic is it that they make that schedule and that we're not going into a second fish window?
That's a great question. We have, as of last week, requested from the Corps a 2-week extension to the permit window for both dredging in the shipping terminal area and capping, pile driving, fender pile driving for the Maple Street bulkhead. So we're hopeful we're going to get most, if not all, of that 2 weeks extension. The worst case scenario would be not getting it done, having to quit, and having to come back, then remobile again, and be back here again August 1st to do that. But at this point, that is looking at unlikely.
So are we 2 weeks behind schedule? Is that what you're saying?
We are actually, yes. Well, we could be potentially. That's why we're asking for it now. We're asking for the permit extension a month ahead of when we need it, because it takes the Corps of Engineers a while to say yes.
But if we need those 2 weeks, we would then be 2 weeks behind
We
at
would
that
be
point.
2 weeks behind the permit schedule, yes, and the construction schedule.
In our schedule.
Yes, yeah. And one of the reasons for that is we ran into, as I said originally, we ran into a lot of obstructions on the north shoreline, a lot of multiple piling that were not evident, a lot of concrete debris that was not evident until you started.
Don't get me wrong, 2 weeks behind isn't a bad deal. That's a good deal.
It is, but I wish it wasn't. But it may not be. We're working hard with the contractor, and I want to say the contractor's been very accommodating to do what he needs to do to try to get this done in that window.
All right, thank you, John, and thank you, Mr. Way, for coming today. All right, let's move on to our next one. Diane?
A motion to adopt Resolution 1226L, providing for the annual renewal of the harbor's rules, regulations, and procedures, and incorporating new requirements for merchant leaseholders, LLCs, and partnerships, Upland Storage, and Blaine Boathouse Fire Safety.
Thank you, Diane. Commissioners, Dan Stahl, Maritime Director. The item before you is several significant changes to the rules and regs for the harbors.
You got 1,000 questions.
This is really the day-to-day operations of the marina, so we didn't go into any new policy areas, and I just wanted to point out, just based on the last 2 action items that we've had, if you look at this current action item and look at fiscal impact, it says there's no direct fiscal impact to the port, so that may be comforting as we go through this. There's several significant chunks here. Attachment A is merchant leaseholders. I will take that one on. The next section is LLCs and partnerships. Andy Peterson from our Blaine Harbor Master, he'll go through that one because he has the most tenure with that particular issue. There's an old expression on the waterfront that says one man's trash is another man's treasure. We spent a lot of time in 2005 going over gear in the harbor and how that looks and where it should go. Kyle Randolph will take on attachment C, the outside storage, because this has been kind of a Squalicum issue significantly. And then last but not least, Pam Taft will do attachment D. She's our special projects administrator because the abandoned gear deals a lot with RCWs.
All right, it looks like there's a general request for a 5-minute break, so let's do that for 5 minutes, and we'll come back at 5:10 35-ish.
Okay.
Thanks. Should I ask all 10 of my questions on this one? Should you what? All 10 of my questions? Ready for that? You have 10? I have 10 questions. Anybody who wants to leave can leave. This is terrible. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that last conversation to go that long. Really? I was optimistic. It's a You can't tell I'm freaking out about the steak, can you? No. No. But here's the scoop, though. It's really ultimately. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's no votes. So you want. What if we put in a solar powered pump about 10,000 horsepower at the head of the waterway that just pushed the water a little bit faster?
Can I get your signature now? So
Apparently the new president has an iron glass.
That's our standard document that we use to input anything into a meeting.
One of these before. Where do I sign?
Well, I crossed out executive director and commission
Just
president.
right here?
Dan was right after
Yes,
you.
please.
He went running out.
And
then I just attached.
oh, I got the done that twice today. There. Could have left 16 on there, I guess, too. Okay.
Head for the rail.
The front door of my van is very useful for that too, Frank. There's a lot of pee on the inside of my door. It's like, well, when you gotta go, you gotta go.
You know, my brother told me, I told you he's a carpenter, my younger brother. He says this for life. He said, Frank, you know the difference between.
You know, that's,
Hey, Joe.
I tell you, it amazes me how many things come out of the bathroom.
What's that?
Just disgusting. You guys come out of the bathroom and wash your hands.
I know.
Good.
Restaurant. Did you see that commercial for bleach? You see that commercial for the guys?
Oh, yeah.
For bleach.
I saw that.
With MSC, Military Sealift Command, for his sophomore summer. Could be. Where's Jack gonna be?
He doesn't know yet.
So this summer, Jacob will be probably on either.
Recess. Diane's going to quickly reread the motion, and Dan, you can go ahead and start back where you were, if you would.
A motion to adopt Resolution 1226L, providing for the annual renewal of the harbor's rules, regulations, and procedures, and incorporating new requirements for merchant leaseholders, LLCs, and partnerships, upland storage, and Blaine Boathouse fire safety.
All right, thanks, Dan. You don't have to do everything you said, so if you just want to start where you finished off, that's fine.
Okay. So this is a resolution for updates to the rules and regs. This resolution embodies a lot of the work that Marina staff, the Marine Advisory Committee, and working with both in-water and upland tenants, where we worked through this last year. We finished with the last MAC meeting in December of 2015 to tee that up for your consideration today. The attachments have all of the detail in them. The staff presentation will cover some of the highlights. All of the materials that you have gone through the legal filter and have been scrubbed. I will take on the merchant leaseholder review. That's attachment A in your packet. Attachment B, Andy Peterson will do, our Blaine Harbor Master, because he has the most tenure with that issue. One man's trash is another man's treasure. We spent a lot of time talking about gear on the waterfront. Some stuff looks beautiful to somebody and maybe not somebody else. Kyle Randolph will take on attachment C, and Pam Taft will do attachment D, which is the abandoned gear. Those two issues go hand in glove, and Pam is the one that works mostly with the RCWs and how those apply to the marina. So any questions on kind of process, how we work through this? All of these attachments are in a single resolution, which we're asking for your approval today. If approved, those will go into the rules and regs and be effective tomorrow. Okay. The merchant leaseholder review, this was a priority for the Marinas Department in 2015 because of several items that came up over the years. Commissioner McCauley, several times you came to me with an ad from Craigslist and said, what is this about moorage? And the rates there didn't match the port rates. And is that legitimate? And what's going on? It was not legitimate, and we put a stop to it when we found it. We had a couple liability issues with merchant leaseholder vessels where we had a good relationship with the merchant leaseholder. One of their tenants had an issue in our facility, and we just couldn't get the liability to work. We actually had to write up a lawsuit with one of our merchant leaseholders to get an issue resolved. And periodically, there had been complaints from the wreck boaters that we were giving too many slips to the merchant leaseholders. So those accumulated in kind of your policy bucket. And when the budget was adopted for 2015, your direction to the marinas was do a review during that year. And that's what we set out to do this last year. And we did. So the process was I came to you at a work study in June and laid these issues out to you in about half an hour, 45 minutes. We worked through them, and you gave me the direction that you wanted to see in the review. Staff took that input, and then we went and met with the merchant leaseholders, all of them. We invited them to the table. We had a brown bag lunch, and we started to negotiate those items with them. And then at the following MAC meeting that's held in here on the floor, we gave an update to the advisory committee and got their input. And then we went back to the merchant leaseholders, and we went 4 times around the block. So we had 8 meetings to get through all of those policy issues. And I'm very glad to say that at the last informal meeting that we had with the merchant leaseholders, all of them that were in attendance said that they could live with what we'd come up with. And we took it to the MAC, and we went through it line by line, and the MAC put their thumbprint on it recommending for approval. Here are a couple of the content pieces out of that that would specifically allow merchant transient moorage for the merchant leaseholders. That's something that the current rules and regs don't allow them to do. So they appreciated that flexibility. We eliminated the 10% markup that the current rules and regs allow for moorage rates. And we're very clear with the merchant leaseholders that we didn't expect them to take 10% less. We just didn't want them to attach that to the moorage. So that when they're quoting moorage to somebody, Bellingham moorage is the same, whether customers are getting the number from marina staff, Squalicum or Blaine, or a merchant leaseholder. And what the merchant leaseholders will do then is they'll take that 10% markup and they'll put that into the other agreement that they have with all of their vessel owners that cover insurance and maintenance and upkeep and all of those things. And that took some give and take, but at the end of the day, they were okay with that.
And Dan, before you move on, was the 10% covering all the services, the 10% on top of the port mortgage? Was that covering all the services of the merchant leaseholders?
It was just a markup.
Okay, so then they are taking a 10% hit on this particular item. So in order to get that amount back, they have to add some percentage to the other services they're providing.
Correct, and they've agreed that that's a reasonable thing for them to do.
Okay. Was there ever a conversation about reducing the mortgage rate for merchant leaseholders by some percentage?
I'm sure they would all appreciate a drop in their mortgage rate, but that wasn't part of something that came out of the policy discussion that I got from you gentlemen, so I didn't put that on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the second to last bullet up there on new mortgage agreement addendum. So we worked really hard on trying to address the liability issue with the merchant leaseholders because they have vessels that come and go from their berths all the time. We didn't want to bury them in a bureaucracy, and yet we needed to have some relationship with our customer to make sure that the public, the port, had the proper insurance. And the harbor masters took the laboring oar with this, and we ended up with a very, very simple one-page addendum to the mortgage agreement that meets our needs on insurance and is very minimalistic from the merchant leaseholder perspective. And we shook hands and said this is a good deal, and so that's what's in your packet as well. And the last item on there, transfer of ownership clarified. That was specifically requested by Roger Van Dyken to make sure that if a merchant leaseholder, which is a business that has both a foot in the water with moorage and an upland lease, if they want to sell to somebody, that those documents all work together. So I reached out to Shirley in the real estate department and in Frank's office, and we made sure that our language is integrated so that if a merchant leaseholder wants to sell their business, that package can move through without any surprises. So the in-water and the upland work together. So those were the highlights from the merchant leaseholder changes. Are there any other questions or concerns the commission has? Very good. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Peterson, and he's going to go through the LLC section, which is attachment B. Andy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Andy Peterson, Harbor Master at Blaine Harbor. This item that I'm going to be talking about is with regards to some issues we have with limited liability corporations working within the harbor. Those are also known as LLCs. Some vessels that come to the harbor for moorage are owned by a legal entity or a partnership, or perhaps even multiple partners. And an LLC is one of the vehicles that allows partners to own a boat. Unfortunately, these LLCs also have the ability to circumvent the port's moorage assignment process, which I will explain with the graphic up in front of you right now. So this graphic depicts typical moorage progression that we would see with boaters here at the harbor. Off to the far right, you'll see a small 27-foot boat, and that is being depicted moored out at the end of G West, which is a lovely moorage area, but for some people it's a little less desirable than being moored right at the bottom of the ramp. So a new boater to the harbor might end up with one of those less than desirable slips at the end of G West, and then through the port's berth change request list, over time, move closer to the bottom of the ramp, closer to the parking lot, which you can see with the big arrow going to the 36-foot boat. And then over time, as they mature as boaters here at the harbor, eventually they might end up with that nice 48-foot uniflight in the bottom left-hand corner. So our current rules and regulations would allow a boater with a desirable slip who chose to keep that boat moored in the name of an LLC to assign interest in the LLC or perhaps even sell the LLC as part of the sale of a boat, which would then allow the new owner of the boat to assume the slip in the name of the LLC, which would circumvent our waitlist policy, bypassing a lot of our good customers that have been waiting for a long period of time on our berth change request list for a bigger slip or a more desirable slip. So the changes before you today we're asking for will help prevent this under-the-radar approach to bypassing the waiting lists. And those proposed changes will ask that LLCs and corporations desiring moorage in the harbor will provide annual proof of membership to the harbor office, and they will disclose any transfer of beneficial ownership in the LLC. So those two components are designed to keep someone from selling their LLC, or to keep someone from buying an LLC and then buying a desirable slip in the harbor. And then annually, as we move forward, the port will require proof of membership in the LLC to ensure that going forward, that these LLCs aren't handed off or traded. Did you have any questions for me this afternoon?
Dan?
I don't.
Bobby?
I have one. Annie, as I read through this, I want to clarify so if a partner in an LLC wants to buy out the other partner and he's the listed senior partner, he can buy that boat and it will stay in the slip they have. Am I correct on that?
In the partnership situation, yes.
Okay, so if I wanted to buy Frank's boat and he was on the paper and he had a slip I liked, I could stay there if I bought his boat had I already been a partner in that vessel, but I wasn't listed as the managing partner, so to speak.
Right, and there are a number of those that are in effect right now that we have the ability to address those that are in existence right now, moving forward. But moving forward past this point, though, if one partner wanted to buy into a vessel, or if someone wanted to buy into an LLC, at that point they could sublease. They could be in the slip for up to a year, but they would have to acquire moorage through the waiting list.
Okay, thank you.
Now, that's not too fair if it's for fishing boats as well. If a father sells a son a fishing boat, he can't keep the same spot he's had for 20 years?
So with the fishing vessels, right now we don't have the waiting lists or the berth change request list for the commercial fishing fleet right now.
Very good.
So we've got some flexibility to work with those, absolutely got the flexibility to work with those crews.
Thank
What
you.
we're looking at with this is, very desirable 50-foot moorage in Bellingham that's got an extensive wait list to prevent somebody from outside the area basically buying the right to the slip without us knowing about it.
Right, and that's good.
Andy, I've got 4 questions for you. Section 2.3D and subsection 3A, it's titled Partnerships. Attachment B, I think it's page 2 of 3. And it says, it's regarding purchasing another vessel. I'm trying to find out exactly where I intended. A partner who purchases another vessel does not have moorage seniority. So the question I've got, can a boat be on the list rather than an owner as far as seniority goes?
No.
Only owners can?
Yes.
Why?
We recognize the owner as having the moorage with the harbor, not the boat. And I think if I could just add, this is letter A, partnerships. Is that what you're inquiring about?
Yep.
So in the past, I think the easy way to explain this, in the past, we've had people, a boat owner that might form a partnership with a family friend, share the boat. And if after 30 months, one of the partners wanted to transfer the boat, wanted to get out of the boat and leave it to the other partner, that wouldn't be a way for one of the partners to get an extra slip in the harbor. It wouldn't be a way to get an additional slip in the harbor is to form a partnership between 2 boat owners and then split the partnership up. That doesn't mean that each boat owner now gets a slip.
Mm-hmm.
I think is that answering? That was the intent of that section.
I have a whole pile of questions on this, but that's a completely different scenario. It seems that this is a very expensive way to circumvent rules. I don't know that people would even try, but they do?
It has been done, yes.
That's nuts. All right, so 2.3D subsection 3B, so just below this one, and then I, and then it's A and B. So on A and B, on A, it says, Port of Bellingham not granting moorage. This is bottom of page 2, attachment B. Port of Bellingham not granting moorage or upland facilities or upland storage, which are to LLCs or corporations formed to evade a waiting list. How could that possibly be done when the list is assigned to a person?
So the intention there would be if a boat owner with a prime 50-foot slip at the bottom of the ramp, desirable slip, might sell his boat and didn't want to give up the slip for some reason, he might form an LLC with someone that has a boat that could be put into that slip.
Okay, but
To maintain the moorage, to hold the slip.
but he's still, his name, her name, that person's name is still on a boat in the slip that they have.
Yes.
So they've just chosen to buy a different boat. How are they evading a waiting list?
They've chosen to partner with someone that had a boat, and what we're looking at is that person that they might have partnered with. What we want to make sure is that the person that they're partnering with, that person's achieving moorage through our waiting list or our berth change request list policies, and they're not buying their way into the slip by creating an LLC.
So, Commissioner, maybe I can help out here. The fundamental issue with LLCs is that it allows you to separate out the concept of ownership interest from control. So you and I, Commissioner, could form an LLC. We could each own 50% of it, but you could have total control over the LLC. Or I can own 1% of the LLC and have total control. So what can happen is somebody has a slip and they say, I own this boat in an LLC. They have absolutely no control over the boat. They're not involved in it at all. All that happens is the person who owns the boat pays them. They take part of that payment and pay the port for the moorage. And what happens is somebody's able to, for lack of a better expression, barge one of the lines and put their boat in a primary slip by the use of an LLC.
But isn't the downside is that you have to share the boat? So
Well, no,
right?
because you nominally own 1% of the LLC that you and I own together, but I have total control over the boat and you have no right to the boat. You just are a 1% owner and you're the slip owner.
Again, that seems kind of a convoluted way just to get a better slip at the bottom of the
Well,
ramp.
but if I make it worth your while because I pay you $100 a month over what you have to pay the port, would you do that?
Again,
Commissioner McCauley, this happens all the time, and it's unfortunate. And part of the problem is if you walk all the way to the end of the farthest pier we have, it is one long walk. But if you own a boat right in front of the yacht club, and I want to buy that boat from you, I can buy it, but then I have to move it within a year from that slip. But if you and I form an LLC and you sell it all to me but 1%, we just stay right there and I get to keep that slip. And the problem is people don't get to move up at all on the waiting list, and that's the. Is that correct, Andy?
That's a good characterization.
So motivations aside, however, I'm the owner of that smaller boat way out in G West, and I've got my name on a list. It happens to come up. It's the list for a longer slip, but I don't even own the boat yet. I can't afford to own the boat. I've always wanted one, so I go find a partner, but now I can't get that slip because I don't actually own the boat myself.
In the scenario that you just provided, in that case, you could decline the slip and not lose your spot on the berth change request list. So we're not penalizing you for not having the boat yet.
But I may have to wait until another, well, I will have to wait until another slip opens up.
That is correct.
Okay. Bob?
Go ahead.
All right. So.
And Commissioner, before you ask
yep.
your next question, this is an iterative process with the with the marina staff. So obviously one could say, we're gonna ban all LLCs for private boat owners, you know, which is, you gotta have your name on the title. I think what port staff is saying is, we're gonna try in this process and see if we can get a handle on this kind of moving around, forming LLCs and evading your policies and procedures. If that doesn't work, then I imagine port staff will come up with another approach. So it's kind of customer service based. I mean, the easiest thing is just to ban LLCs and say no private boat can be an LLC. You know, somebody has to own the thing. But I think port staff is trying to follow your policies on the list by coming up with the next level, and then we'll see how that works.
See, this is why we should not ever allow a boat with a lawyer for an owner into any of our harbors, because this has gotten okay, so how about C? The next one, C. Applicants offered moorage may be permitted to sublease their slip for up to 12 continuous months. Is there any other opportunity to sublease? There isn't, is there? This is the only time you can sublease.
No, any boat owner here at the harbor's able to sublease their slip.
Okay, in this case, it's a transfer to an LLC or a corporation.
That's correct, and that was trying to be consistent with our other sublease policy to make it fair for, trying to stay consistent with our other policy.
Okay, and then one final one, and this is a legal, I guess, a legal question. It's section, I think it's D.
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
It's, so 2.3D, subsection 3, and then sub B, I, and then D. So it's just one below. Still seconds, page 2? No, I'm on page 3. Page 3. All right. Individual boat owners may wish to change their vessel's ownership to an LLC. Okay. This change must receive prior approval from the harbor master before the moorage agreement is assigned to the new business entity. The way I'm reading that, it says they can't change the ownership to an LLC unless the harbor master says they can.
That's correct. So.
But the point, though, is that they won't get moorage unless the harbor master says they can have the LLC. Well, I'm reading it says they can't do an LLC unless the harbor master says it's okay. But it's really about assigning moorage.
Correct. The intent there is to get ahead of the curve on this. So if somebody wants to assign to an LLC, they come to the harbor's office, say, I want to drop my boat into an LLC. That's fine, but they're told you have to maintain the beneficial ownership of the LLC, and it has to really be you that owns the boat. And if you don't do that, you put your mortgage at risk.
That's correct.
So it's sometimes hard after people have done this because they talk to lawyers who say, oh, I can figure a clever way around these lists. Here's what we'll do. And sometimes they come to the port and the money's already changed hands, and and the boat's there, and then your port staff has a difficult job right then, right?
So that's my next question. Somebody's formed the LLC, they don't know this subsection exists and some very deep regulations, and now the harbor master says, sorry, it's against our policy. What do you do to the boat? You kick it out?
So that's where we would work awfully hard to accommodate our customer, educate them up, and we'd plan on educating them up front through the newsletter, and we can catch some of this when people sign up for moorage.
Okay. That's it for my attachment B questions. Anything further on this one?
I have another question. So let's use your 26-foot boats out on the end, and he gets a chance to move up to the inside.
Yes.
And the 48-footer is left, and he's got a chance to move there.
Right.
What do we do with the length difference? Now, are we renting slips to the recreational folks by length of a slip? So that 26-footer's in a say a 30-foot slip, and that 48-footer's in a 60-foot slip. Does that 26-footer move into the? I mean, what do you do with the?
So we build boat length or berth length, whichever's greater.
Okay.
So if a 27-footer was offered a 36-foot slip, and he had plans, let's say, of buying a bigger boat,
okay,
or she had plans of buying a bigger boat within a very reasonable amount of time, we'd let him stick the 27-foot boat in the 36-foot slip. He'd pay for 36 feet.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
That reasonable length of time is a year, is it not?
Yeah, and we understand. I've been through this number of times where boat deals fall through all the time, due to a survey or something like that. So we do the best we can to work with the customers.
I don't have any other questions.
All right, is that it for you, Andy?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Kyle Randolph. I'm the Harbor Master for Squalicum Harbor. I'm here to talk about Attachment C relating to a new classification of outdoor storage for basically merchant leaseholders and the commercial fishing industry. Essentially, through the merchant leaseholder review process, we became aware that the merchant leaseholders had storage needs that were really beyond our capacity to fill under the current conditions at the harbor. Basically, the web lockers have such a demand on them and have such a long wait list that the merchant leaseholders won't get a web locker within the time frame that they really require. And so in an effort to be responsive to their needs, we began looking for alternative ways to allow the merchant leaseholders to store equipment on port property. We understand that it is a need. These guys can't be renting storage out on the Guide Meridian where they have to go back and forth 10 times a day. It's a big waste of time. And so in looking for alternatives, we look towards the commercial fishing industry. They have a pretty long history of storing valuable commercial fishing gear on trailers out in the parking lots. And they principally do that in these areas that we've labeled now permitted open trailer storage lot A and B. And this is to the northwest of Web Locker 1 and to the southeast of Web Locker 4. We've had a pretty good history of commercial fishermen storing their gear in that lot. There's been a little bit of expansion on realistically what we should be doing, but for the most part it's worked. The problem is that it's, according to the current rules and regulations, not permitted. And so we figured we'd do a good job of satisfying the storage needs of both the commercial fishing industry and the merchant leaseholder industry by legitimizing the practices of the commercial fishing industry, as well as bringing the merchant leaseholder industry into that as well. Their needs are very small. We're talking maybe 10 parking spaces. We have the space available there for that. And so we've developed the permitted outdoor trailer storage areas that you see there. And basically, they do four main things. They most importantly help us meet the outdoor storage needs of the merchant leaseholder and commercial fishing industry. We have the room there, we have the capacity, so it seems like a no-brainer to try to go out of our way to make that happen for them. The second thing is it also develops a tag or permit system for the users. We want to make sure that these areas are being used appropriately. We don't want people putting household furniture on this equipment or on these trailers. We don't want it to expand beyond the areas that we have available for the customers. And so the tag system allows us to meet one-on-one with the customer, make sure that they understand that they can only put equipment on trailers in the appropriate areas and the appropriate equipment. So commercial fishermen can only put commercial fishing gear. Merchant leaseholders can only put merchant leaseholder gear on those trailers. It also allows us to kind of put guidelines or standards on the equipment themselves. So if a trailer is going to be going in our lot, it needs to be movable. Not all of them are, unfortunately. They also need to be safe. They can't stack gear so high that it could become a hazard in high winds. They need to make sure that hazardous materials are contained. Like we had a hydraulic spill one day because of a gillnet drum that was placed on a trailer and the hydraulic lines leaked into the water, or into the parking lot, which inevitably could potentially lead to the water. So and lastly, and from the Harbor Master's perspective, probably most importantly, assist with the cleanup of abandoned gear. We've been asked a lot on why we don't do a better job at cleaning up the harbor. And realistically, we can always go to a customer and say, no, you can't do that. But without having a good, sound policy on what a customer can do, it's really hard to enforce regulations. We've been allowing commercial fishermen to keep equipment on trailers for quite some time. It's worked. We really can't point at one person and say, you can't do that, but they can. This gives us a clear set of rules and regulations that everyone must abide by. The correct people can only use it, and will go hand in hand with the abandoned gear regulations that Pam's going to talk about in a minute. Otherwise, it doesn't do any good to have policy if you don't have teeth to back it up, and it doesn't do any good to have teeth if you don't have a sound policy. So that's essentially what the permitted open trailer storage lots are there for. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Is there a number of permitted trailers allowed per person? Per business, let's say?
Yeah, we want to be reasonable to customers. It's really easy to say you can only have one. No, that's it. But everybody is different. Probably one trailer for a commercial fishing vessel is adequate. The merchant leaseholders, because they're a big company, we're talking about some of them have 60 vessels. So we'll probably allow them to have more than one trailer in there, maybe two. We're not going to go crazy. No one's going to get 10, but it needs to be within reason.
But at this point in time, there's no number affixed to this
There is
program? Okay.
I have no questions.
I've got a couple. One's a point to make. In an earlier document in these attachments, the permanent open trailer storage is also maybe confused with what was described as permanent open storage. Is there a difference between permanent open storage and permitted open trailer storage?
I'm not familiar with that specific terminology unless
Okay.
we're talking about the fenced storage area maybe.
All right, so let's check these to make sure that where it references permitted open storage, because it also says pots right next to it, and I couldn't figure out where the T was coming from. It's on page 2. All I wrote down was page 2 further up on this list. All right, so having said that, one of these subsections on attachment C is all gear must be drained of oils and fuel, hydraulic lines adequately capped to prevent spills. You did address that. When you say all gear, I've got a truck that's got my nets on it. I'm not draining the transmissions and the axles.
Sure, so these permitted open trailer standards, we put the T in there because we would really like it to be just trailers.
Okay, next question then. Portable storage containers. A lot of our clients use portable storage when we kick them out of their houses to do remodels, do
We've
portable
addressed
storage.
that. At this time, we don't think that it would probably be very appropriate to allow containers in the harbor.
Okay, so it's got to be a trailer.
Something we can move, because we do have to move these around for the 4th of July and various other reasons if we want to seal coat the parking
Okay,
lots.
are we enforcing any roadworthy or licensing standards?
We're not. The only standards we have are can we move it from one area to the other?
Okay, a 2-axle trailer, a couple of tires are flat. What do you do?
I worked hand in hand with the CFA and as well as Jim Kyle, and we discussed that. I would really like all tires to be inflated at all times. The problem is, a lot of these tires are pretty old. They're tubeless tires, and tubeless tires, when they don't move very often, they get flat spots, they tend to leak air. So realistically, my response would be, I need a trailer, if I put air in it, for it to stay aired long enough for me to move it to the appropriate area.
Okay. All right, that's it for me.
I kind of missed the one about the trucks. I'm glad you brought that up. We do have commercial fishermen in the harbor that have bought trucks to put their nets on that are mobile. Absolutely. And also those nets that are on those trucks, in most cases, are too heavy for trailers. So how do we address that?
That's a great question. A lot of these regulations, thankfully, are supported by the concept that Harbor Master has discretion. And so we really need to be realistic. We can't come down really hard on people. And so it's important to recognize that there are some trucks that have weeds growing out of the engine block that are being used as trailers. Realistically, those probably need to find another home.
Okay, Kyle, thank you for that. And I'm glad to say you will use discretion, because that's a good thing to keep peace in the harbor when you start moving people's stuff.
We have no intention of creating a hardship for anybody. We just want to make sure the harbor is safe, clean, and everyone's needs are being met.
And I agree. Thank you.
You know, I can't believe how deadpan you said Harbor Master has discretion. That was good.
It's my favorite line in the rules and regs.
You might have more than even Rob in this case. I recently had an opportunity to spend some time wandering around Port Townsend's waterfront, and when I saw the amount of activity happening there, although it's much more condensed, it may look like there's more. I don't know if there is more, but so I'm tending my own personal sort of approach to what's happening down in this particular area in regards to trailers, flat tires. The questions I ask is, does it look like somebody's working, or is it just crap storage? And sometimes what, Dan, you started off with, one man's trash, another man's treasure. So, I've got a canoe in my yard that, according to my wife, needs to leave. According to me, it's off the table. So I do appreciate the discretion, and I think working with the CFA, when there is an issue, and that you'll probably find good resolution there. So,
Are you bringing it down to the port to start?
I am not. That is.
I do have one more.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
One more question for you, Kyle. Do we have an ongoing search for more storage area for outside gear? Are we going to try and figure something out to maybe move that stuff away from where it's at so that we don't have to move it on the 4th of July and so on and so forth?
Sure. So for 2016, one of my responsibilities is doing a little outreach to determine whether or not external storage for vessels on trailers or any other gear is realistic financially, practically, and so that's something I'm going to be looking into in 2016.
All right, thank you.
Cool. All right. Anything further, Dan? All right. Dan, you're all squared away on this one.
I was going to say this at the end, but I've been to almost every MAC meeting and watched these guys arm wrestle time and time again on these. I mean, Kyle and Andy and Dan and Pam, and it's gone around and around and around for years. And people have brought pictures in, and weeds growing out of boats, and flat tires that haven't, and people who have died, and their gear's still in the trailer. So I've seen all of it. So, I agree with these, and if I had something, I'd certainly say it, but I don't.
Thank you.
It's the quiet justice on the Supreme Court here.
Hi, Commissioners. Pam Taft, Special Projects of the Marinas. So I'm going to talk about abandoned gear. Abandoned gear is defined as the owner of the property is unknown or is known and unresponsive. So the property is just left there. And after a period of time, depending on if it's a vessel or gear or equipment, it's considered abandoned. And Washington state law defines abandoned property and abandoned vessels two different ways. And the rules and regs don't contain any provisions in there to separate those out and put standards in place with what we expect, nor does it give us a remedy to handle situations when property shows up. So staff worked with the MAC, and we developed the regulations to address the abandoned property, and that's what you see in Attachment D. So the proposed changes in front of you for your consideration start with defining vessel, and that will be consistent with RCW because trailers are also considered vessels. So they're handled differently. They wouldn't be treated as property. It would be under a statute for dealing with vessels. And the other thing is we want to define the abandoned property and the abandoned vessels separately, and it also gives the port remedy to deal with the abandoned gear. So it goes through the statutes on what we can do and how we would get rid of the property. So that is in Attachment D.
Pam, do you mean a boat trailer is a vessel?
Yes.
If it was a storage trailer, it would just be storage trailer.
Pardon?
If it was a storage trailer, flatbed or a cargo style trailer, that would be a vehicle.
Right.
Okay.
If there's no questions, I will go into the last item in your packet.
I do have one, but Bobby, anything in this one?
Go ahead with yours. I'm still thinking of
All
this.
right, Dan? Of course, you're here, see? So this has come up before, and I'm not sure I've ever followed it up or I've just forgotten. We do have a process for putting things up to auction. If it's not purchased and it has to be recycled or otherwise thrown away, is there any mechanism to recover costs after that, or do we just abandon the effort?
Well, with vessels, we can go after funds from the DNR under the Derelict Vessel Fund. With storage, not so much, like gear, equipment that we just have laying around, we would, unless it sells, we wouldn't be able to recover costs associated with that
Okay.
sale.
Okay, I think in our budget, there's always a line item for that, so that's what that does. Okay, all right. That was the only question I had. Bob?
So with gear that we know we can't put up for auction, do we have a plan to take care of that, to dispose of it, that I'm not seeing in here?
That is what we could do with it. That would be an option if it didn't sell.
Okay.
We also have that option if the property that we find is valued under $300.
Okay, thank you.
Good. All right, next, yeah.
All right, the last one for you is Attachment E. We didn't include this in the PowerPoint. It relates to the boathouses in Blaine. So in June of 2015, the Blaine City Council adopted a new ordinance establishing fire regulations for the boathouse. So this change adds language into the rules and regs requiring the Blaine boathouses to be in compliance with that ordinance. And this is consistent with what we've required for the Squalicum boathouses and the City of Bellingham ordinance that they adopted as well. And that concludes.
I do. I do not know Blaine's ordinance for boathouses. Can you enlighten me, because there's no explanation of what that ordinance and what that requirement is to the owner of the boathouse as far as financial?
I probably will turn this over to Andy Peterson because he worked with the city on this development.
So, Dan, I also have the ordinance here in front of me. Might be useful for us to get a copy of that to share. It is online, but it might be a printed copy might be useful. But yeah, go ahead, and if you miss anything, I'll try to backfill it with what I see.
The suggestion for inclusion in the rules and regs at this time is just to make a requirement that the Blaine boathouses get into compliance with their side of the ordinance. So we're not imposing anything additional on them. And what we're doing now is consistent with what we did with the boathouses here at Squalicum when the City of Bellingham passed a new ordinance. So we're just trying to make sure that we get our rules and regs lined up with what the municipalities have done. One of the projects that we have for 2016 is to look at the implementation of that ordinance because it's likely to cost us some money with the pressure line that we use to feed those boathouses. Andy and I had a meeting with representatives from both of those multi-party boathouses in Blaine, up in Blaine, where we sat down and we talked about strategy. And so they're working on their end and we're working on our end. The ask for the rules and regs now is really almost housekeeping. It just says, it acknowledges in our rules and regs that the landscape has changed. The City of Blaine has passed an ordinance and you guys need to be in concert with it.
So I'm assuming this is a sprinkler system when you're speaking of high-pressure lines?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, Dan, it looks like there's 3 items: standpipes, smoke and heat vents, and automatic fire sprinklers. So the standpipes have a 2-year requirement from when this was adopted by the City of Blaine, and I'm assuming they just borrowed the International Fire Code language for this. Do you know when that was, when it was adopted by Blaine? June. 15, so we've got a year, almost 2 years remaining a year and a half.
We think our standpipes are in compliance.
Okay, and then the smoke and heat vents, that's the boathouse owners have 2 years.
Correct, and we don't think either of those are going to be used. That it will be the sprinkler system that will, what the City of Blaine did is they essentially took the City of Bellingham's fire ordinance, copied and pasted, and then staff here worked very closely with them. Sylvia Goodwin spent a lot of time, Andy spent a lot of time, I spent a little, working with the City of Blaine and trying to look at the specifics in Blaine Harbor and take out some of the things that they had included from the City of Bellingham's ordinance that maybe didn't apply as well there, and to work through that process. And so the end ordinance from the City of Blaine was, I'd say, significantly refined from the early one that got kind of let out for public comment. And what we think the implication is the sprinkler system. That's pretty much what will have to happen. But the owners of the boathouses there need to carry the water on that, so to speak. They need to hire somebody to look at that and do the math to get in compliance with code.
Okay, so I haven't actually read this particular one. It looks like, though, that smoke and heat vents are required, or is there some language in that it says one or the other?
It's based on a square footage, Commissioner.
Okay.
So the boathouses in Blaine exceed events would apply to.
Okay.
So they would, because of their, just because of the square footage.
They're all going to end up, no matter what, with fire sprinklers. Okay, and they have 5 years to do that. Okay. And then one other thing in this is it says that there's an operational permit for a boathouse. We don't have anything like that, do we?
That would be for the boathouse owner.
What's an operational permit?
I believe that's between the boathouse, oh, sorry, it's right in front of me. I believe that's between the boathouse and the city or the fire department.
We don't do that here in Squalicamore, rather, do we? With the city of Bellingham and boathouse owners?
I believe that may be in the ordinance that the city of Bellingham passed as well.
Okay.
But again, we don't own those structures, and so we're not in that loop.
Okay, so as far as just customer service goes, I'm assuming you'll all be walking through these with the boathouse owners as we go, probably with some legal help to explain each one of these then?
Well, as I mentioned, Andy and I went up there. I went up. Andy's there all the time. We met with the owners, and we worked through the ordinance. And so they're trying to get their arms around the math. There's two boathouses that are butt up against each other, and they're trying to work together to find a common solution.
Okay.
So they're doing their part. And then in the capital budget that the commission passed this last fall, there's money in for this year for us to work on the pressure line. Norm Gilbert's the assigned engineer. We're starting to get that rolling. And those two will meet up.
All right, great. That's it for me.
Do they have any idea what the cost is going to be to the boathouse owner for their part of the sprinkler system?
They do not, currently they don't know yet. And that's what they're trying to get their arms around.
Are we prepared to assist these folks with this stuff monetarily if the cost is rather high, or are we just going to drop it in their lap? And I would ask if we were to assist that it's say a monthly add-on fee until it's paid for or something like that, or are we just going to let them deal with it themselves?
I think we're working through that right now, Commissioner. They haven't asked for that, but those structures are there. They're a part of the harbor, and if they came to us and said, Port, would you be the bank? Would you front something and they could pay it back over time? That's an interesting concept, and we bring that back. Staff would do some analysis and give you some options, and then bring that back, and you could look at that. But they haven't asked for that to date.
Okay, I was just curious if that would be an option.
Yeah.
Anything further? Nothing further?
Are you ready to vote?
Are you wrapped up? That's it?
Conclusion of the presentation.
Okay.
Before we vote, I just, once again, really want to thank the four of you for all the hard work you've done on this. And also Brian Pemberton as chair of that MAC committee. The leaseholders, as we call them, merchant leaseholders in Marine Talk, for the folks watching this on a video, those are charter boat people for the most part. And when it came time for him to vote, he recused himself, which he should do. He didn't even vote for these when it pertained to his particular area. I just, hats off to all of you for the great job you do. And boy, I've heard nothing but compliments on the harbor masters. And thanks for getting this done. It's really going to help.
Thank you for taking the time to go through this. This was a lot of minutia. I mean, we basically took our whole year's worth of work and we presented it in about half an hour. So thank you for bearing with us and going through the details.
And, wow, I'm not going to say another thing about this evasion thing, so thank you. Bobby, anything further? You done?
I'm done.
That's it,
You're
all
not gonna
right.
say anything about what?
Well, whatever. This evading and working little scenarios so that people can be a little closer to where they park their car.
Well, there's an option. We could supply roller skates.
I just kind of figure if you've driven, 16 miles in from the county to get your car, another 100 feet of walking, maybe that's me, I don't know.
Maybe it's an age thing, Mike.
It's an age.
It's not 100 feet. And it's with all your gear for the weekend.
Can I exaggerate a little bit? All right, all in favor on this one, say aye.
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 All right. Thanks again, y'all, appreciate it. Okay. We are down to new business. I believe Mr. Briscoe has something.
Boy, put me on the spot.
All right, hang on. Dan, you got anything new?
I don't.
All right, now you're on the spot.
I would like you to take care of the item we spoke
That's it? Really?
No, that just.
Yeah, that's
to
on my
go-
list.
go for- you
Yeah, I
wanna
got-
wait or do that
No,
first?
I'll finish up. That's fine.
Okay. All right. New business for me. I'm concerned about the fuel dock in Blaine, and I would like to see a fuel dock in Blaine up and running by June 1st of 2016, port owned and operated at the existing site of the Marine Dodd Marina tanks where they are now, and pipelines out to the dock. It's a hardship for both recreational and commercial industry that works out of Blaine Harbor. Sure, you can go across to Semiahmoo and buy fuel at an exorbitant price rate. It's like being held up. Not having a fuel dock there, I feel, is a hardship for Blaine's economy, for one. So that is something I would like my fellow commissioners to think about and engage in
Hey,
a
Rob,
conversation.
we did discuss this last year at some point. Was there any kind of a date that we gave it?
So the goal was to move the fuel dock, and so when we abandoned that structure, we did. I believe the lines are removed from the bulkhead to the dock, and we leased out the dock. Obviously, the lines can be put back in. My bigger concern is we have a lease in place that we would have to dishonor or terminate prematurely. There might be some costs associated with that. I'd also want to understand the difference in the fueling between Semiahmoo and Blaine. Why we could do it cheaper than possibly Semiahmoo. I'm not saying that we can't do it cheaper. I'm just saying we don't usually do things cheaper than the private sector. So we need to look into all that. This is work we can do, and we can come back to you with some recommendations. The other side is the permitting of it. June 1st may be a tall order, just knowing what it takes to get permits in water to do anything. I'm not an expert on fuel docks. Maybe it's easier than I think. But if you could give us some time, staff will take a look at this, and we'll prepare some feedback for you and give you a quick update on it.
So maybe by next meeting, just a refresher on what we have already discussed and what those options might have been then?
Yeah, that sounds good.
The reason I ask for a June 1st, if possible, is the timing for the fleet to start fishing, and both recreational things take off about that time. So,
Sure.
I understand that it may not be a possibility, but if you don't ask, it doesn't happen.
Absolutely. We'll look into it, and we'll get you some information on that. Everything from permitting to cost to what it would take to operate.
I do have one question for you, Rob, with the lease that we have in place now with, and you're speaking about, it's Old Blaine Crab, I think Dakota something now, I can't remember what it is. I assumed that was still on a month-to-month lease?
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so
we've answered one question already.
And that's why I put that time, because I was pretty sure we were there. The redesign and repair of the Blaine Sawtooth work dock as early as possible this year. We've got, as Mr. Patterson brought forward, correct, Mr. Patterson? As he brought forward, we have some very big issues with right around us, the Sawtooth that need to be addressed for people just to get into facilities that are renting from the port. We also have a dock that's about 75% non-usable that also affects the economy of Blaine. And the things that need to be done in the Blaine Harbor on the commercial side of things, the industry side, have been put off far too long, and we need to move as soon as possible on doing some of these things to get some things moving in that harbor to help the economy of Blaine.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was looking to my staff for a possible update. I know we did some budget work on the Sawtooth. Is that for this year, or is that for next year?
I think it's 17.
Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. We have condition surveys done for that, and we do have money budgeted for this year that could be purposed toward that actual thing. I'm not sure where we're at permitting the work, but again, we can get stirred up on that quickly.
I think Dan and I are both remembering that some work could be scheduled for 17.
That's what I remember.
Was there anything that can be done before then?
Well, that's what we're going to learn. Thank you. Currently the way the budget is we have $400,000 to look at this whole industrial peninsula and get all the engineering done, get kind of a master plan that we would then incrementalize and prioritize according to budget, where we'd repair all the things around that industrial peninsula. And you're correct that we anticipated doing the work in the 2017 fish window. But that said, if the commission makes this a priority, obviously we're going to make it a priority, and perhaps we can make some work into the 16-fish window.
Well, I think Commissioner Briscoe has a hands-on appreciation for this facility much more than I certainly do. So I think if you want to lead the way on this charge, I think you might find some support over here.
If there is if we do go forward with the fuel dock, and if there is a big enough need for a fuel dock, then we should be able to have the private sector run it. I'd much rather see the private sector run it than the port run it, because it gets costly. And if there's a need, as you say, a private sector guy could make money out of it as they do at Samiamo.
All right, anything further?
I have some more things here. The old concrete building that Dodd or Blaine Marine owned that's adjacent to Boundary Fish Company, that also needs to be removed as soon as we can possibly deal with that. It inhibits the semi-trucks from getting to the shipyard so that he can load and unload vessels off of semis with his travel lift. It also impedes the big truck movement through there for both crab buyers, both Dakota, I forget what it is, it's Old Blaine crab and boundary fish. I mean, and that was the discussion at the July meeting of why they had to move from this dock to that dock, because they couldn't get their trucks through there. It's a result of Boundary building their bigger building in addition on. So we need to deal with that fairly soon, because it's inhibiting the Walsh Marine from doing business, and the other folks there doing business also.
Excuse me, is it a problem for Sound Pacific as well?
No, they have plenty of room where they're at.
Thank you.
Another thing is,
Before we move on that one, Shirley, I think I asked you about this last year on this particular, this was why I think that the building where the appliances were sold, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Was there any internal discussion about removing that and possibilities and timelines, costs, et cetera?
Well, actually, the tenant is required to remove that building, but under the terms of their lease. So that is something we are working on internally with legal, and then there are some environmental issues on that site that we need to resolve, and that was part of the whole project of removal of the building, the environmental cleanup, et cetera.
Okay.
But we will give you a more in-depth update in the next week or so.
Okay. Thank you.
am I okay to go?
Oh, you just keep rolling, yeah.
The portable building that the port owns at the Walsh Marine Ways site was put over the sidetrack. So when you sidetracked vessels, they were under cover. That portable building needs to be moved to go over the railway system they have there now. That will allow him to paint undercover as he would have it sidetracked. When the sidetrack was taken away due to environmental issues and people changing ownership, it would solve two problems for Walsh Marine. One, they would have a covered area that they could both blast and paint in, which would increase their business, which would increase would profit Blaine's economy as well. It would solve some environmental issues because that railway would then be covered and not accessible to rainwater, which seems to be a problem with the environmental community, with rainwater falling on that railway. That's something they're faced with. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. And I would like, if I can ask staff to look into what the cost is to have a crane lift that, if they can lift that with the one crane and set it over, just basically move it over 100 feet or so.
Are we talking about the tent that was put up in like 2008?
Correct. It's the metal frame tent.
Is that our building?
I don't believe it is.
I think it's owned by
It's
the.
Walsh, but I'll check into it.
Yeah. Well,
Can you shed any light on that, Andy? You've been around. I was pretty sure that was, I mean, both Mr. Walsh told me that, and along with some other folks.
we'll look
I could be wrong.
We'll look into it. I just don't remember building that. I remember it being built, but I don't remember the port doing it. So, but we'll look into it and figure out what the ownership is.
Okay. And one of the other things I'd like to look into is the feasibility of having our own repair crew, so to speak, or marine infrastructure crew that takes care of our pilings, our docks, our bulkheads, and basically a marine waterborne maintenance crew that we used to have here at the Port of Bellingham that took care of things on a day-to-day basis, so to speak. One of the problems I have with these big bills we see is like Blaine, the infrastructure was let go so long because we didn't have our own crew to work on it. We pile up a $10, $15, $20 million bill because we let things go for some amount of time so the project's big enough to bring somebody in. And I would like to see if we could put a crew back together with a small push tug and barge and various equipment to take care of pulling piles, driving piles, that type of thing. If that's feasible versus, what it costs us to have these folks come in, because I think by the time you figure out the cost plus the add-on to having these big jobs done, I think we could do it ourselves and put some more people to work at the Port of Bellingham.
I'd like to see financially how that would pencil, because to me, there's not much the port does that the private sector can't do better as far as having crews working
Oh, I saw some
full-time.
sad faces when you said that.
Well, no, it's landscaping and so
I
on
see
is
what-
one thing.
you know
but-
what you're saying.
But to have it port-owned, I mean, I'd like to see the financial comparison.
I agree, Dan.
Before I
and-
weigh in on that.
And that's part of what I said, is the feasibility versus to having the private sector do it.
So I think, Adam, I don't know if you and I have actually talked about this. I know Rob and I have talked about this, but one of the things that speaks, I think, specifically to Commissioner Briscoe's concerns is a lot of deferred maintenance. Have we done, or are we starting on just sort of a port-wide survey of what are the actual needs? Because maybe a lot of this could be added on with a couple of staff members in maintenance versus just, waiting until there's a project.
Let me say two things to that. The first one is we are constantly looking at in-house versus hired services, and including this janitorial thing we spoke about earlier. I think it's just something we always need to be able to look at. 'Cause there's certainly a lot of services around the port that have the potential to be privatized, and it's a question whether that's the economical thing or the right thing or what we want to be as a port. So we always are looking at that. Second thing is regards our infrastructure. What we did just earlier this fall was map out all of our infrastructure, and then there's a engineering group out there that I'm afraid I can't recall the name, but they suggest a frequency for how often you look at facilities and how often you repeat what we call condition surveys. And so what we're doing is getting ourselves onto a standardized, leveled out budget that looks at all of our facilities, groups them geographically, and then puts those on hey, this one's on every 5 years. We look at Blaine, we look at Squalcombe Harbor, Fairhaven, whatever it is. And then our subsequent budgets follow those condition surveys. And right now, it's just a little bit sporadic and haphazard, and I think we get into deferred maintenance situations. The goal for our budgeting every year is to get far more of a leveled resources approach to that. So I hope that answers your question, because I want to see us get onto a standard, something predictable that maintains our facilities on clockwork.
Yeah, I think that's a really good start, and I know that historically, and especially because a lot of what the port owns has been given to it, and it already had life left. So, we're getting into those situations now where we've got failed bulkheads that were, 50, 60 years old or whatever, that were great when the port got them, but the deferred maintenance because they were still fine, but now suddenly we have to pay for it, as opposed to, the private sector or somebody that gave it to us. So, getting started on that now, I think, is really critical, because there could be some really big costs in the future that we either can't pay for or we just have to figure out how to pay for. So is that kind of going down the right direction? Cool. All right. When do you think you'll have that all sort of done? It's going to take you a year, 2 years?
We have a draft of that. So what happens is when you create a standard program, and you're coming from, I'll just say, a more reactive program, that kind of is always putting out fires and that sort of thing. There's just a few years where you're sort of picking up the fragments and the strays and getting them into the more routine program. So we're just starting it now. The 2016 budget reflects a little bit of it. The 17 budget will be much stronger into it. 18 will really start to gather all the pieces. So it really moves on an annual scale like that. So
cool. All right. Any further?
I like these ideas brought up here, but most of these won't come to fruition until after we have our budget meeting and our budget retreats. And a lot of this has to tie in and prioritize with other things that we have out there if it's a big capital improvement cost. I mean, buying a tugboat or something like that is going to be a big capital expense.
See, I'm a builder, I want to buy a crane. He's a boat guy, he wants to buy, or a fisherman, he wants to buy a boat, tugboat. What do you want? What do you want, Dan? Nothing special?
Nothing
Look at you,
special.
just because the cameras are on you, huh?
One more thing is, I think we have something new has come to light in Blaine as far as moorage and transit moorage, so to speak. And we have a lot of trailer boats, mostly crab boats that are going in and out of the water. And some of that's being stored in our day storage lot there. And I think we need to maybe address that with some ideas on, we've got some property, maybe set a storage place up for folks to park their boats and trailers. It's a boat trailer thing. I think Andy might be able to shed some light on that if he could explain that a little bit of what's going on up there. But I think we need to address that.
Andy, do you have any comments on that? Isn't there a storage area by the boat launch that's used by trailers and for gear?
Yes. Is it on? Okay, so yeah, we do have a large boat launch parking lot, and then adjacent to that, we have a marine tenant. One of the port's tenants operates a dry storage yard as well. From time to time, we do get a number of the fishing boats that will haul out and stay overnight in the parking lots rather than towing the boat home. I think that's what the commissioner's referring to.
Right, and I was trying to address the fact that other folks need to use that parking lot and adjacent to the boat launch. And then I believe there's a piece of property adjacent to that boat launch parking lot that may be designated as a commercial storage area, so to speak, short term, for those folks that have their boats in the parking lot that the other public, where the public ramp is, that need to use.
Yes, there's a small grass lot between the port tenant and the boat launch parking lot.
So I would ask that maybe we look into the feasibility of starting something there to take care of that issue that seems to be cropping up as something new.
Cool. Anything else?
No, I got some more, but we're going to let it go because it's like probably the longest meeting you've had.
You had mentioned there was something you discussed you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yeah, I'll bring it up. I am currently on page 7 of 7. I've never gone that many pages of notes. Anything further from you, Dan, at all? All right. So I was remiss in reminding us as a commission to direct Rob to get going on this renaming of the pier up in Blaine. If we could get some action on that soon, that'd be great.
Yeah, the staff and I actually discussed that this morning. The ball's in Sylvia's court. I think she's in Blaine right now because there's a public hearing tonight there, so she's not here. But yeah, she's tasked with finding some information out on that and getting that moving.
Sounds groovy. All right. And then the only other thing is, some of you may have heard, I got a last-minute call from somebody about testifying to the Ways and Means Committee last week, the Senate Ways and Means Committee. So Rob and I went down, and I did address that group. There was, I think, positive reception regarding some more MACA funding, but I think bringing additional attention to it has been great. And I know, Brian, I sounded really freaked out today because the only sort of positive response I felt we got there was that, what's the one thing you've got? And we'll talk about that. So everything else seems to be kind of continued up in the air. But hopefully, if we can all continue with a little pressure down there, we might get some continued movement. So
I watched your presentation on YouTube. Good job.
thank you.
It was on YouTube. That's great. Maritime Day is the 27th of this month, and WPPA will have a presence there. I think a couple of commissioners are going down. Everyone's welcome to go down. But yeah, we'll be putting some pressure on them on the 27th.
Yeah, it's funny because it seems like every year we continue to go down there and say Maka, 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 and I think that's maybe my message is less, let's fix Maka because they're hearing it, but that we aren't coming down here asking for anything else, unlike Boeing. So anyway. So anything further, Dan? Nothing?
Nothing for me.
Bob? All right, Rob?
Nothing, sir.
Nothing further? Legal? Tamara? Nothing at all? Staff? Any remaining members of the public, which is about 2 or 3? Well, she's married to you, so it doesn't count. All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.